The world outside begins to recede, melting away into a soft haze of quiet stillness as the heavy, frantic rhythms of the modern day dissolve into nothingness. You are completely safe, wrapped in a cocoon of profound tranquility, invited to step across the threshold of time into an era where every moment was savored, measured only by the slow lengthening of shadows on ancient stone walls. Let your breathing settle into a deep, rhythmic cadence matching the gentle, unhurried pulse of history itself. We are journeying backward, travelling across oceans of time to a serene, sun-drenched afternoon in the year 1885, where the rolling, lavender-draped hills of Grasse, France, bask under a golden, everlasting sun. Here, within the cool, protective embrace of a traditional enfleurage cellar, the frantic rush of the outer world is entirely forgotten, replaced by a sanctuary of silence, patience, and the delicate whispering spirits of a million velvet blossoms. Feel the cool air of this subterranean haven brush softly against your skin, carrying with it a profound sense of peace and a whisper of ancient floral secrets. There is absolutely nothing else you need to do, nowhere else you need to be, as the gentle, velvety darkness of this historical sanctuary folds around you like an old familiar blanket, promising a night of deepest, undisturbed rest. Allow your mind to drift effortlessly down into the quiet depths of the past, where the only sound is the soft, comforting murmur of time itself standing perfectly, beautifully still. As we prepare to descend deeper into the fragrant, shadowed depths of this historical sanctuary, let your awareness rest gently upon the quiet community we are building together in this space of shared peace. If you find your spirit settling into this soothing oasis, and if your heart welcomes the gentle embrace of these forgotten, sun-drenched afternoons, consider anchoring yourself to our journey by subscribing to these nightly wanderings. By softly pressing that small token of connection, you ensure that this sanctuary remains a permanent haven for your weary thoughts, a timeless refuge always waiting to welcome you back whenever the world grows too loud. Letting your eyes grow heavy, you might also choose to leave a gentle mark of your presence, a quiet gesture of appreciation that helps our shared vessel drift across the vast, calm waters of history to find others who seek this exact same stillness. We journey together, a silent fellowship of dreamers wandering through the golden, sepia-toned corridors of the past, sustaining this peaceful space with our collective quiet presence. Every breath you take draws you closer to the heart of the old cellar, and every shared moment strengthens the invisible, comforting threads that bind our sleepy travellers together across the modern world. For now, there is only the slow, rhythmic pull of the narrative, guiding you gently downward into the soft, waiting velvet of a late 19th century afternoon, where the beautiful work of quiet preservation is about to unfold. The heavy oak door of the atelier creaks with a low, grounding resonance as it swings inward, revealing a subterranean realm where architectural geometry serves the sole purpose of preservation. To step across this threshold is to descend into a sanctuary carved directly from the limestone foundations of the maritime Alps. The air undergoes an immediate, palpable transformation, shifting from the dry, solar intensity of the Provençal hillside to a damp, cellular chill that instantly calms the nervous system. This subterranean climate is entirely intentional. The thick stone walls, blocks of rough-hewn molasses rock quarried from local hillsides, act as a natural thermal barrier, maintaining a permanent, unyielding coolness that protects the delicate fats of the enfleurage chassis from melting. The masonry is a testament to 19th-century rural engineering, where every joint is sealed with a mortar made of lime and local river sand, creating a textured surface that seems to breathe in tandem with the changing seasons. As your eyes adjust to the soft subterranean dimness, the architecture reveals its magnificent utilitarian grace. Overhead, a series of low, groin-vaulted arches spans the ceiling, constructed from hand-fired terracotta bricks arranged in a meticulous herringbone pattern. These arches do not merely support the immense weight of the grand manor house above. They distribute the air currents in a specific swirling motion that prevents stagnation while ensuring no direct drafts disturb the resting blossoms below. Looking downward, the floor presents a tapestry of ancient flagstones, each one irregular in shape and worn smooth by generations of artisans wearing soft-soled espadrilles. These limestone flags possess a deep charcoal grey hue, patterned with subtle veins of white calcite that catch the faint ambient light like distant rivers on a midnight map. The stones are cool to the touch, retaining a microscopic layer of moisture that helps maintain the specific 70% humidity required to keep the harvested petals from desiccating before their precious essential oils can be absorbed. Along the perimeter of the room, massive structural pillars rise like old trees, their bases flared to distribute the immense weight of the masonry. Every surface is coated in a thin, traditional wash of slaked lime, which lends the walls a soft, matte white finish that does not reflect light so much as it absorbs and diffuses it into a gentle, pearlescent glow. There are no sharp edges here. Centuries of whitewashing have rounded every corner, smoothing every angle into a soft, organic contour that mirrors the natural caves of the surrounding valley. The layout of the cellar is organized with a profound respect for spatial harmony and workflow. It is divided into distinct bays or travées, each dedicated to a specific stage of the scent capture process. In the deepest, darkest recess of the cellar stands the Grand Reserve, where the wooden chassis frames are stacked in towering parallel columns that resemble the ancient archives of some forgotten monastic library. These stacks are aligned precisely with the magnetic axis of the Earth to minimize the subtle variations in ambient energy that older distillers believed could affect the quality of the absolute. Between these columns run narrow, labyrinthine pathways just wide enough for a single worker to pass with a tray of fresh jasmine or tuberose. The absence of modern windows is conspicuous. Instead, narrow, angled air shafts known as soupiraux cut through the upper masonry at irregular intervals, angling upward toward the surface garden. These shafts do not allow direct sunlight to pierce the gloom. Rather, they serve as conduits for the sky, filtering the bright afternoon glare into soft, vertical shafts of smoky blue light that illuminate the dancing dust motes without warming the stones below. Every architectural element contributes to an acoustics of profound isolation. The thick earth above acts as an absolute sound dampener, neutralizing the ambient noises of the bustling Grasse marketplace, the clatter of horse-drawn carriages on cobblestones, and the distant shouting of merchants. The only sounds that survive this descent are internal, rhythmic, and incredibly soothing. The slow, rhythmic tick-tock of a heavy brass pendulum clock mounted on the central pillar, the occasional microscopic sigh of a wooden frame settling under its own weight, and the distant, melodic dripping of water from a natural mountain spring that feeds a small stone basin in the corner of the room. This basin, carved out of a single block of dark granite, serves as the cellar's hydrological heart, its water crystal clear and perpetually cold, adding a subtle musical undertone to the silence. The surface of the water remains perfectly still, mirroring the brick vaulting above like a dark obsidian mirror, disturbed only when a single droplet falls from the mossy stone above, creating a series of concentric silver rings that expand and vanish into the shadows. As you wander deeper into this architectural womb, you notice the tactile details that define the workspace. Affixed to the stone pillars are hand-forged iron brackets, their surfaces blackened by years of charcoal smoke and rubbed with beeswax to prevent rust. These brackets hold small, shallow oil lamps made of unglazed clay which burn highly refined rapeseed oil to provide a flickering, amber illumination that produces neither soot nor odor, ensuring the purity of the surrounding air remains unblemished. The light from these lamps casts long, dancing shadows that stretch across the herringbone ceiling, creating an illusion of shifting space that makes the cellar feel at once immensely vast and intimately secure. There is a profound sense of permanence here, an architectural vow that nothing within these walls will ever be rushed, altered, or disturbed by the frantic pace of the world beyond the hills. The very air feels thick with patience, an invisible fluid that carries the weight of history and the slow, deliberate promise of artisanal perfection. In the center of the largest bay stands the master's table, a monumental slab of solid wild cherry wood that has aged to a deep, burnt sienna hue. Its surface is scarred with the history of its utility. Faint circular rings left by porcelain mixing bowls, shallow grooves where scoring knives have slipped, and dark polished patches where the oil from countless human hands has seasoned the grain over many decades. The table legs are thick, squared timbers anchored directly into the flagstones with lead plugs, to prevent even the slightest vibration from shaking the delicate layers of fat on the nearby chassis. Resting upon this table are the specialized tools of the trade, each item arranged with geometric precision: bone-handled spatulas, silver-plated forceps, and heavy leather-bound ledgers containing the secret formulas of past generations. The wood of the table possesses its own faint resinous aroma, a subtle top note of wild cherry and linseed oil that weaves through the dominant, omnipresent fragrance of the cellar, adding a layer of structural warmth to the cool mineral atmosphere. This space is more than just a room, it is an instrument, a finely tuned architectural apparatus designed to stop time, to hold the fleeting essence of summer captive within the quiet embrace of winter stone, allowing the soul to rest in perfect harmony with the slow, deliberate craft of the past. To understand the quiet soul of the Enfleurage cellar, one must observe the primary vessel of its silent alchemy, the chassis. These are the specialized wooden frames that stack by the hundreds along the limestone walls, forming towering structures of silent industry. Each frame is a masterpiece of uncelebrated carpentry, measuring precisely 60 centimeters square, a dimension determined by centuries of ergonomic tradition to fit perfectly within the reach of an artisan's arms. The wood selected for these frames is exclusively aged oak or straight-grained beech, harvested during the dark of the moon when the sap is lowest, ensuring the timber will never warp, twist, or split under the damp conditions of the subterranean vault. The surfaces of the wood are completely untreated by chemical varnishes or lacquers. Instead, they are sanded to a silk-like smoothness using dried horsetail rushes, leaving the natural grain completely exposed to breathe and interact with the ambient humidity. The joinery is entirely interlocking, held together by small hand-whittled wooden pegs rather than iron nails, to eliminate any risk of rust or metallic contamination that might taint the delicate sensory equilibrium of the room. Within the square perimeter of each wooden frame rests a thick pane of heavy hand-blown plate glass. This glass is not perfectly clear like modern windows. It possesses a subtle, watery green tint when viewed from an angle, filled with microscopic air bubbles and gentle ripples that tell the story of its creation in the fiery kilns of Saint-Gobain. The glass must be exceptionally strong, for it bears the weight of a dual burden, a layer of purified fat spread evenly across both its upper and lower surfaces. This coating of fat, known as the core, is the literal canvas upon which the fragrant poetry of the flowers will be written. The application of this fat is an art form in itself, requiring a precision that borders on the sacred. It is a specific proprietary blend of 70% ultra-refined pork lard and 30% beef tallow, washed repeatedly in pure mountain spring water and steeped with benzoin resin to prevent any trace of rancidity. The resulting medium is completely odorless, pure white, and possesses the smooth, matte texture of fresh winter cream. If you observe closely under the soft amber glow of the oil lamps, the surface of the fat reveals an intricate geometric landscape. The artisan uses a specialized wooden comb, or grattoir, to score the white surface with a series of shallow parallel grooves. These grooves are not merely decorative, they maximize the surface area of the fat, creating tiny ridges and valleys that double the space available to absorb the volatile scent molecules floating upward from the blossoms. The ridges are clean and uniform, casting microscopic linear shadows across the white expanse, resembling a freshly ploughed field of snow waiting for the first seeds of spring. The depth of these grooves must be perfectly consistent, exactly 2 millimeters, to ensure that the fat absorbs the fragrance uniformly across the entire pane of glass, preventing any localized saturation that could ruin the balance of the final absolute. The way these frames interact with one another in the dark is an engineering marvel of quiet preservation. Each chassis features a raised wooden lip along its upper edge, designed to interlock seamlessly with the bottom of the frame placed directly above it. When stacked 20 or 30 high, they form an airtight wooden column that seals the resting flowers within a series of miniature isolated chambers. Within these dark, enclosed microclimates, the laws of physics work in absolute silence. The flowers lay gently by hand onto the grooved surface of the lower fat layer, find themselves trapped mere millimeters beneath the inverted layer of fat on the frame above them. As the petals continue to live and breathe in the darkness, they slowly release their volatile essential oils which have nowhere to escape. They are immediately captured and held by the fatty matrix both below and above them, double embrace that ensures not a single molecule of sweetness is lost to the void. The weight of these stacked columns creates a subtle structural compression that seals the joints between the frames, completely preventing any external air currents from entering. The wood itself seems to absorb the collective weight, emitting a very faint, dry, resinous groan when a new frame is added to the top of the pile, a sound that quickly subsides into a deeper, more profound silence. To touch the side of a stacked chassis is to feel the cool, solid reality of time made physical. The wood feels dense, grounded, and slightly cool, infused with the microscopic residue of millions of historical blossoms that have rested within its borders over the decades. The exterior sides of the frames are marked with faint, elegant notations written in graphite pencil, dates, plot numbers from the hills of Le Bar-sur-Loup, and the initials of the master perfumer, creating a quiet, running diary of the harvest directly upon the wood itself. As the afternoon light shifts outside, casting slightly longer shadows down the air shafts, the rows of chassis take on the appearance of ancient stone tablets in a forgotten sanctuary. They stand as silent sentinels of patience, reminding anyone who enters that true beauty cannot be forced, accelerated, or mechanized. The wood, the glass, and the white fat exist in a state of perfect receptive readiness, waiting for the arrival of the afternoon's harvest. Every square centimeter of the apparatus is designed to facilitate a gentle, non-destructive extraction, a method that coaxes the living spirit from the flower without the violence of heat or steam. Here, within the anatomy of the chassis, the fleeting essence of the Provençal landscape is given a physical anchor, a wooden and glass cradle where it can sleep undisturbed until its transformation is complete. The space between the columns of frames forms a narrow alleyway where the cool, humid air settles into pockets of absolute stillness. Walking through these corridors, one is aware of the massive potential energy stored within the room, thousands of square meters of surface area, all primed to capture the invisible. The geometry is comforting in its regularity, a clean human structure imposed upon the wild, chaotic beauty of nature. It is here, in the meeting of straight-grain oak and smooth white fat, that the industrial romance of 1885 finds its quietest expression. The world outside may be racing towards steamships, telegraph lines, and roaring engines, but inside this cellar, progress is measured by the slow, microscopic migration of scent from a soft velvet petal into a cool, silent bed of fat, process that requires nothing more and nothing less than absolute, unyielding stillness. Beyond the cool limestone walls of our subterranean cellar lies a landscape of unique geographical poetry, a specific cradle of earth that makes this entire industrial alchemy possible. Grasse does not merely exist, it hovers balanced gracefully upon the amphitheatre-like slopes of the maritime Alps, looking down toward the distant azure mirror of the Mediterranean Sea. This specific topography creates a microclimate found nowhere else on the globe, a protective basin where the fierce, freezing alpine winds known as the Mistral are deflected by the high northern ridges of the Plateau de Courcelles, while the warm, moisture-laden breezes of the sea are channeled gently upward through the valleys. The result is an atmospheric thermal blanket, an eternal sun-drenched sanctuary where winters are uncommonly mild and summers are long, luminous, and heavy with coastal humidity. The soil beneath this landscape is equally miraculous, consisting of a rich, calcareous clay inflected with iron oxides and ancient marine fossils, a fertile, well-draining terrain that forces the roots of the flowering plants to dig deep into the limestone strata to find their sustenance, concentrating their aromatic juices to an unparalleled intensity. As the afternoon progresses toward its golden zenith in 1885, the geography reveals itself through the open air shafts of the cellar, carrying the distinct thermal signature of the hillsides down into our cool retreat. One can mentally trace the terraced fields or restunks that step down the hillsides like giant stairs of green and gold. These terraces, built with dry stone retaining walls that have stood since the Middle Ages, Maximize every square inch of the steep terrain, capturing the solar radiation during the day and radiating that warmth back into the soil during the cool Provençal nights. On these narrow strips of earth, generation after generation, farmers have cultivated a delicate agricultural tapestry. To the north, where the elevation rises toward the high crags, are the ancient olive groves, their silvery green leaves shimmering like a field of scattered coins whenever the wind breathes across the valley. Below them lie the sweeping ribbons of lavender, their deep purple rows undulating along the contours of the earth like a quiet inland sea. But it is the lower terraces, closest to the town's ancient ramparts, that hold the true treasures of the Grasse industry, the vast, meticulously tended plots of jasmine and tuberose. These fields are treated not as mere crops but as delicate open-air salons where the earth is weeded by hand with small iron hoes and nourished with composted leaves and sheep's manure until it possesses the dark, crumbly texture of grated chocolate. The geography here dictates a precise rhythm of human movement. The steepness of the slopes means that no heavy machinery, no steam-powered tractors, can ever violate the peace of these fields. Everything must be accomplished by the steady, rhythmic labor of human legs and hands, establishing an unbreakable bond between the physical contours of the mountain and the liquid essence that eventually pools within the glass vials of the perfumers. The landscape is a living organism structured by stone, sustained by the sea, and animated by the tireless devotion of its inhabitants. From the high vantage point of the town's central bell tower, the surrounding valley looks like a vast green funnel that catches the light of the sun and concentrates it into pure botanical energy. The proximity to the sea, just 15 kilometers away, ensures that every evening a soft, salt-tinged fog creeps up the valleys, enveloping the flower fields in a wet, protective embrace that prevents the delicate buds from drying out under the intense Mediterranean sun. This daily marriage of alpine dryness and maritime moisture creates a specific atmospheric tension, a seasonal heartbeat that dictates when a flower will open, how much wax its petals will develop, and the exact hour its scent will reach its peak composition. It is a geography of absolute balance, where the elements of earth, water, stone, and wind have conspired over millennia to create the perfect laboratory for the cultivation of beauty. Inside the cellar, we are intimately connected to this external topography through the subtle changes in air pressure and temperature that filter down from the surface. When a cloud passes over the sun high above the valley, the light within the supereau shifts from a warm amber glow to a cool slate blue, a silent signal that the outer world is constantly shifting its robes. The stone floor beneath your feet is an extension of that very mountain rock, a solid anchor that reminds us that the delicate fluid we seek to capture is born of the deep, dark secrets of the earth. The cellar is not isolated from the geography, it is its ultimate destination, the quiet crucible where the essence of the entire valley is brought to be preserved, concentrated, and immortalized within the wooden matrix of the chassis. As you contemplate this vast, sun-kissed basin, you can almost feel the slow, ancient movement of the water that flows beneath the hills. Deep within the limestone strata, a network of hidden subterranean rivers, fed by the melting snows of the high Alps, channels pure mineral-rich water beneath the town of Grasse. This water emerges in a series of natural springs and fountains throughout the commune, supplying the washing troughs of the tanners and the cooling basins of the distillers. It is this abundance of hidden water within a dry Mediterranean landscape that allowed Grasse to transition from its medieval origins as a town of leather tanners to the undisputed world capital of perfumery. The water washed the hides, then it washed the flowers, and now it flows silently past our cellar walls, a cold underground pulse that keeps the air sweet, fresh, and perpetually calm. The human geography of 1885 is woven seamlessly into this natural landscape. The town itself is a dense, vertical labyrinth of tall, ochre-washed stone houses that cling to the hillside, their terracotta-tiled roofs overlapping like the scales of a sleeping dragon. The narrow, winding alleys are designed to exclude the harsh summer sun, creating cool corridors of shadow where neighbors call out to one another in the soft, musical cadence of the Provençal dialect. This community is entirely single-minded. Every family has a connection to the fields or the factories, every child knows the scent of jasmine before they know the taste of wine, and every elder can predict the quality of the harvest by the feel of the morning air against their skin. The geography has shaped the culture, turning the hard, unyielding stone of the mountains into a source of fluid grace where the ultimate expression of human labor is the capture of a passing aroma, a beautiful, fleeting ghost held captive by the architecture of stillness. The character of the afternoon is defined entirely by its light, a golden liquid luminescence that filters down through the narrow stone air shafts and transforms the cellar into an architectural canvas of amber and shadow. Outside, high above the subterranean vault, the sun has begun its slow, majestic descent toward the jagged crest of the Estoril Mountains, shedding its sharp white midday glare for a softer, more indulgent palette of ochre, sienna, and warm apricot. This light does not rush into the cellar, it creeps, sliding down the rough, lime-washed masonry of the ventilation flues with an unhurried grace that mirrors the movement of honey. By the time it reaches the flagstone floor, the solar energy has been stripped of its heat, leaving only a pure optical residue, a series of elongated glowing rectangles that shift imperceptibly across the dark limestone over the passing hours. It is a light that understands the sanctity of the space, illuminating the work of preservation without threatening the stability of the cool, delicate fats resting within the wooden chassis. As you sit in the stillness, your eyes become attuned to the microscopic theatre that plays out within these isolated beams of light. Millions of tiny dust motes, invisible in the deeper shadows, become brilliant, floating stars as they enter the sunbeams. They do not whirl or scatter. Their movement is a slow, weightless waltz governed by the gentle circular air currents created by the cool floor and the vaulted brick ceiling. Each mote appears to be a minuscule fragment of the history above, perhaps a speck of dried lavender blossom from last year's harvest, a microscopic fibre of unbleached linen from an artisan's apron, or a grain of golden pollen carried down from the surface gardens by a passing breeze. They drift upwards, suspend themselves in the warm amber air, and then slide back down into the cool shadows, an endless, silent snowfall that marks the passage of time without ever making a sound. The interaction between this late afternoon light and the surfaces of the cellar creates a visual landscape of extraordinary depth. When a sunbeam hits the edge of a stacked wooden column, the rough sawn grain of the oak frames seems to ignite, revealing every tiny ridge, every indentation of the carpenter's plane, and the soft silver patina that only decades of human touch can bestow. The graphite pencil markings on the sides of the frames, the numbers, the dates, the abbreviated names of long-dead harvesters, are cast into sharp relief, standing out like ancient runes against the glowing timber. The light then skims across the exposed edges of the hand-blown plate glass panes, refracting through the watery green crystal to create brilliant, emerald-hued arcs that dance across the opposite wall, shifting and vibrating with a slow, aquatic rhythm whenever a cloud brushes the sun on the surface. Where the light falls upon the master's wild cherry wood table, it exposes the rich, multi-layered history of the craft. The dark, polished patches where the artisan's forearms have rested for 20 years gleam with a deep, mirror-like intensity, reflecting the amber oil lamps like twin stars. The shallow grooves left by the bone spatulas look like tiny canyons filled with soft violet shadows that elongate as the sun sinks lower in the western sky. Even the tools themselves are transformed by this hour. A silver-plated forceps resting on the edge of the wood catches the light, throwing a long, sharp needle of brightness across the dark flagstones, while the unglazed clay of the oil lamps absorbs the warmth, its matte surface turning a deep, rich terracotta that contrasts beautifully with the cool grey of the surrounding stone. In the farthest corners of the room, beyond the reach of the direct sunbeams, the light dissolves into a series of rich, comforting twilights. Here the walls are not white or grey, but a velvety charcoal blue, deep enough to suggest an infinite expansion of space. The shadows are not empty, they are thick and textured, filled with the silhouettes of stacked frames, hanging drying herbs, and the heavy contours of the central pillars. This darkness feels protective, a soft insulation that cradles the mind and allows the eyes to rest after the bright stimulation of the modern world. The contrast between the bright golden shafts of light and these deep velvety recesses creates a rhythm of vision that is profoundly restful, a visual lullaby that coaxes the brain into a state of quiet, meditative focus. As the hour grows later, the angle of the light becomes increasingly acute, sliding up from the floor to touch the bases of the groin-vaulted arches overhead. The hand-fired terracotta bricks of the ceiling, arranged in their precise herringbone patterns, begin to glow with a deep rose-gold intensity like the embers of a dying fire. This overhead illumination throws the structure of the ceiling into magnificent perspective, highlighting the mastery of the masons who laid these stones in 1885. The arches seem to expand, stretching upward into the gloom, creating an atmospheric grandeur that rivals that of a hidden cathedral. It is a reminder that this space, despite its utilitarian purpose, was built with a sense of reverence for the natural world and the wonders it contains. The fading of the light is so gradual that it can only be measured by the slow, inevitable takeover of the amber oil lamps. One by one, the long golden rectangles on the floor begin to shorten, pulling their skirts back toward the air shafts like shy spirits returning to the sky. The smoky blue light within the flues deepens into a rich twilight indigo, signaling that the sun has finally dipped below the mountains and the soft, cool mantle of the Provençal night is beginning to fall across the valley. The cellar responds by settling even deeper into its own internal light. The small flickering flames of the rapeseed oil lamps, casting a warm, constant protective glow that will guard the resting flowers through the dark hours ahead, maintaining the perfect, tone-changing environment of this timeless sanctuary. To immerse oneself fully within the quiet heart of this 19th century workshop is to realize that silence has its own tangible surface, a complex tapestry of textures that can be felt through the skin and imagined in the mind's eye. Every object within this subterranean chamber possesses a distinct tactile language, a physical voice that speaks of long, unhurried development, meticulous human maintenance, and the slow, stabilizing touch of time. The air itself feels textured, thick with an ultrafine suspension of microscopic wax particles, essential oil droplets, and the invisible moisture rising from the cold limestone floor. As you breathe in this atmosphere, it does not feel thin or fleeting like the outdoor air. It feels dense, substantive, and smooth, coating the throat and lungs with a comforting protective layer that slows the pulse and brings a deep, somatic sense of security. If you were to extend a hand into the amber gloom and allow your fingertips to graze the surface of the lime-washed structural pillars, your skin would encounter a rich mineral topography. The slaked lime, applied coat after coat over generations of spring preparations, has built up a thick organic crust that completely rounds the sharp edges of the underlying masonry. The surface is matte, dry, and slightly chalky, leaving a faint, powdery residue on the skin that feels like the crushed petal of a desert flower. Running your hand lower along the stone, you would feel the transition to the raw, unwashed base of the pillar, where the rough-hewn molasses rock remains exposed. Here, the texture is coarse, crystalline, and cold, pitted with tiny volcanic air pockets and ancient sandy grains that have remained unchanged since the mountains were pushed up from the prehistoric seabed. Contrasting sharply with this dry, mineral coldness is the smooth, yielding landscape of the core, the purified fat resting within the wooden frames. To touch this substance with a polished bone spatula is to experience a material of absolute purity, a solid that behaves like a slow, dense liquid under pressure. It is cool, yet it possesses a hidden thermal density that absorbs the warmth of the room without breaking its structural form. The surface, scored into clean parallel ridges by the artisan's wooden comb, feels completely uniform, a series of microscopic peaks and valleys that are silky to the glance and perfectly receptive to the touch. When a single jasmine flower is pressed into this white matrix, the fat gives way with a silent microscopic elasticity, parting just enough to cradle the green sepals before closing around them in an unyielding, protective embrace. It is a texture of pure reception, a white canvas designed to record nothing but the chemical memory of fragrance. The wooden frames themselves offer a third tactile dimension, a comforting, fibrous warmth that balances the mineral stone and the smooth fat. The aged oak of the chassis, stripped of its bark and planed down by hand decades ago, has been seasoned by 20 years of subterranean dampness and the natural oils of human skin. It does not feel rough or splintered. Rather, the grain has developed a dense, hard, silk-like patina that feels almost like old leather or heavy compressed paper. The corners are slightly rounded where the hands of the artisans have gripped them thousands of times, sliding them out of the stacks, carrying them to the worktables and lifting them back into the darkness. There is a clean, dry, structural honesty to the wood. It feels utterly reliable, a heavy, grounded frame that holds the delicate glass and fat in a permanent state of absolute alignment. Beneath your feet, the flagstone floor presents a grand, collective mosaic of wear and passage. Each stone has its own distinct physical story to tell. Some are slightly concave in the center, worn down by the sliding footsteps of apprentices carrying heavy loads of blossoms, their surfaces as smooth as the water-worn pebbles found in the bed of the Siagne River. Other stones, located near the perimeter walls where the weight of the masonry is greatest, feature tiny microscopic fissures, fine, hairline fractures filled with dark calcite crystals that have healed themselves over centuries of structural settling. Walking across these stones in soft leather slippers, one can feel the subtle variations in temperature and slope, an organic geography that connects the body directly to the deep foundations of the earth, providing an immediate sensation of being grounded, safe, and entirely supported by the past. Even the tools resting upon the master's wild cherry table possess an evocative physical presence that begs to be described. The bone-handled spatulas carved from the dense ribs of oxen and polished with sheep's tallow feel heavy and perfectly balanced in the palm, their tips tapered to a flexible knife-like edge that can slice through the fat with absolute precision. The handle is warm, instantly matching the temperature of the hand that holds it, its ivory-colored surface yellowed by time and etched with fine brown lines that trace the natural growth of the bone. Nearby, the silver-plated forceps feel metallic, cold, and springy, their long, slender prongs terminating in tiny, ridged teeth, designed to grip the delicate stem of a tuberose without crushing the juicy tissue of the blossom. Every instrument is an extension of human sense, a specialized bridge between the coarse physical world and the microscopic kingdom of aroma. As you look around the cellar, your eyes rest upon the textiles that drape the workspace, the heavy unbleached linen cloths used to cover the fresh flower baskets and protect them from the drying air currents. This linen is a product of rural looms woven from thick, irregular threads of homegrown flax that retain their natural oatmeal-colored hue. To touch this cloth is to feel a stiff, honest texturing, a fabric that does not cling or drape softly, but folds into structural, architectural shapes that look like grey cliffs in the dim light. The surface is cool and slightly coarse, smelling faintly of the sun-drenched fields where it was dried after washing. When laid over a wicker basket filled with newly picked jasmine, the linen acts as a breathable shield, keeping the internal environment moist and dim, preventing the delicate white stars from bruising against one another as they await their placement upon the white bed of fat. Every texture in this room, from the heavy linen to the cold stone, works in perfect, silent harmony to create a temple of absolute, undisturbed preservation. The silent sanctuary of the Enfleurage Cellar is inextricably bound to the grueling yet beautiful routine of the harvest that takes place on the sun-drenched terraces high above its stone vaults. In this year of 1885, the collection of perfume flowers is dictated not by the hands of a mechanical clock, but by the biology of the blossoms themselves. Jasmine, the undisputed queen of the Grasse hillsides, operates on a nocturnal schedule of exquisite precision. As the late afternoon sun begins to dip below the western mountains, the tight green buds that have spent the day basking in the intense Mediterranean heat begin to swell with a hidden vital energy. They do not open during the glare of midday. Instead, they wait for the precise moment when the air cools and the first stars begin to pierce the velvet sky. It is then, in the deep quiet of the night, that the small, white, five-petaled stars burst open, releasing their heaviest, most intoxicating waves of scent into the damp night air. This biological clock forces the human community into a matching choreography of early morning labor. Long before the first glint of dawn breaks over the horizon, while the valley is still wrapped in a blanket of cool silver fog, The harvesters, mostly young women and children from the local communes, make their silent way down into the terraced fields. They wear heavy, wide-brimmed straw hats to shield their eyes from the coming sun, and their waists are tied with wide canvas belts that support deep, willow wicker baskets. The work is a marvel of delicate, repetitive dexterity, moving down the rows of dark green shrubs with a ghostly, floating motion. Their hands dart among the leaves like pale birds. They do not grip or pull, instead using their thumbs and forefingers, they execute a precise twisting flick at the very base of the flower stem, snapping the blossom away cleanly without bruising the petals or damaging the remaining buds. Every movement must be completed with absolute gentleness. A jasmine flower that is crushed or squeezed during the picking process will instantly begin to oxidize, its pure white petals turning an unsightly brown, and its volatile oils degrading into a sharp, unpleasant scent of decay. The picked blossoms are dropped softly into the wicker baskets, which are lined with damp, unbleached linen cloths to maintain a humid microclimate. The harvesters work in a state of quiet, meditative focus, the silence of the morning broken only by the dry rustle of canvas skirts against the branches, the occasional call of a distant rooster, and the rhythmic soft thud of fresh flowers piling up within the baskets. By the time the sun has cleared the eastern ridges, transforming the silver fog into a golden haze, the harvest must be complete. Any flower left on the bush after the heat of the day arrives will see its essence evaporated by the solar rays, its value lost to the open air. Once the baskets are filled to the brim, they are carried immediately to the weigh station at the edge of the field, where the master perfumer or his trusted lieutenant checks the quality of the yield. The flowers must be free of morning dew, for excess moisture on the petals would introduce water into the enfleurage fat, causing it to spoil and grow mold within the dark stacks of the cellar. The weighed baskets are then loaded onto small, two-wheeled wooden carts pulled by gentle, slow-moving donkeys, whose hooves are wrapped in rags to soften their impact on the narrow cobblestone paths leading down into the town. This unhurried transportation ensures that the flowers are never jostled or compacted during their journey from the hillside to the workshop, preserving their physical integrity until the moment they are delivered to the cellar door. When the carts arrive at the entrance of the atelier in the early afternoon, the atmosphere shifts into a phase of deliberate interior preparation. The baskets are carried down the cool stone steps into the subterranean vault, where the sudden drop in temperature instantly suspends the flowers' aging process, locking their fragrance within their cellular structures. The unbleached linen covers are removed, revealing a sea of pure, dazzling white that seems to radiate its own internal light within the dimness of the stone bay. The scent that rises from these baskets is overwhelming yet remarkably clean, a rich, narcotic cloud of pure jasmine that fills the lungs and immediately induces a state of deep psychological tranquility in anyone who breathes it. The next stage of the rhythm belongs to the sorting tables, where older women whose eyes and hands have been refined by decades of experience examine the harvest petal by petal. Sitting on low three-legged wooden stools under the soft illumination of the oil lamps, they gently spread the flowers across clean wicker trays. With practiced rhythmic movements of their fingers, they remove any stray green leaves, broken stems, or tiny insects that might have been gathered during the morning rush. They also discard any blossoms that show the slightest sign of browning or deformity. Only the absolute elite of the harvest, the perfectly formed, pristine white stars, are permitted to proceed to the final step of the process, their direct deposition onto the cool white sheets of fat within the waiting chassis frames. This daily cycle represents an unbroken chain of human devotion and natural cooperation that defines the year 1885. There are no shortcuts, no mechanical interventions that can replicate the sensitivity of a human finger or the specific timing dictated by the sun and the stars. The rhythm of the harvest is a slow, steady pulse that beats through the entire community, binding the life of the field worker directly to the silent work of the cellar artisan. As you rest in the deep shadows of the room, you can feel the weight of this collective effort, a beautiful, unhurried symphony of labor that transforms the fleeting beauty of a Provençal summer morning into a timeless, liquid legacy that will endure long after the fields have fallen asleep under the winter snow. The true alchemical secret of the enfleurage process lies not in the flowers themselves, but in the silent, receptive medium that captures their elusive spirits, the core. This substance, which appears so simple and uniform when spread across the glass panes of the chassis, is actually the result of a rigorous traditional preparation ritual that occupies the winter months when the flower fields are dormant. The creation of the perfect absorption fat is a highly guarded secret among Grasse artisans, passed down through generations from master to apprentice via handwritten leather ledgers and unspoken demonstrations. It requires a profound understanding of animal chemistry, absolute cleanliness, and a degree of patience that mirrors the slow growth of the ancient mountain oaks outside our walls. The foundation of the medium consists of two distinct animal fats, each chosen for its unique physical and chemical properties. The first is highly refined pork lard, which accounts for approximately 70% of the total mixture. Lard is selected for its extraordinary softness and its neutral yielding consistency, which allows it to remain pliable at the cool temperatures maintained within the limestone cellar. However, pure lard on its own is too soft to withstand the weight of the stacked chassis without spreading or slipping from the vertical glass panes. To provide structural integrity and a higher melting point, it is combined with 30% prime beef tallow, harvested exclusively from the kidney fat of pasture-raised mountain cattle. This specific ratio creates a compound that is firm yet receptive, stable yet soft, the perfect physical canvas for the delicate work of fragrance capture. The refinement of these raw fats is a long, laborious process of purification that takes place in the courtyard of the factory. First, the fats are chopped by hand into small uniform cubes using heavy iron cleavers on a solid block of beechwood. These cubes are then placed into large copper cauldrons heated over a very low, slow-burning fire of charcoal and cherry wood. The heat must be kept minimal. If the fat is allowed to boil or scorch even for a single second, it will develop a permanent smoky odor that would completely ruin its ability to receive the pure scent of the flowers. As the fat slowly melts into a clear golden liquid, the artisan stands over the cauldron with a long-handled copper skimmer, continuously removing any impurities or cellular tissues that rise to the surface. Once the liquid fat is completely clear, it undergoes the critical process of lavage or washing. The molten fat is poured into large stone troughs filled with crystal-clear mountain spring water that has been chilled with ice from the high alpine peaks. The mixture is beaten vigorously with large wooden paddles, forcing the fat to come into intimate contact with the water. This washing process is repeated up to 20 times, using fresh water each time until every single trace of animal odor, salt, and soluble impurity has been completely stripped away. The fat transforms during this process from a yellow liquid into a dense, snowy white cream that is entirely odorless, a material so pure that it reflects the grey stone walls of the courtyard like a pristine field of fresh winter snow. To ensure that this pure fat remains stable and does not spoil during the long months of the summer harvest, it is subjected to a process called stabilization. The artisan adds a small, precise quantity of natural benzoin resin imported in dried tears from the forests of Siam. This resin, pulverized into a fine aromatic powder using a heavy bronze pestle and mortar, is stirred into the warm fat where it dissolves completely. The benzoin acts as a natural antioxidant, preventing the fat from oxidizing or turning rancid when exposed to the air inside the chassis. Furthermore, it contributes a microscopic baseline warmth to the fat, a faint balsamic sweetness that sits at the absolute bottom of the sensory spectrum, acting as a natural fixative that will eventually help hold the volatile top notes of the flower fragrance. The final step of the ritual is the application of the prepared fat onto the glass panes of the chassis, a task performed with an almost religious devotion to uniformity. The artisan uses a heavy, flat iron trowel that has been slightly warmed over a small charcoal brazier. Dipping the tool into the liquid fat, they spread it across the hand-blown green glass with a single continuous sweeping motion of the arm. The movement requires an incredible degree of muscle memory. The thickness of the fat layer must be exactly 3 millimeters across the entire surface of the glass, without a single ripple, bubble, or bare spot. If the layer is too thin, it will quickly become saturated with scent and fail to capture the full potential of the harvest. If it is too thick, the excess fat will insulate itself from the flowers, wasting precious material. Once the fat has cooled and solidified into its final matte white state, the artisan takes the specialized wooden comb and scores the surface with those precise parallel lines that maximize its surface area. The finished chassis is then stacked in the dark recesses of the cellar, where it will rest for several days to achieve thermal equilibrium with the limestone stones before the first blossoms are laid upon its bed. To gaze upon a newly prepared chassis is to appreciate the silent foundation of human ingenuity that underlies the entire industry. This white expanse of fat is not merely an ingredient, it is a masterpiece of patient refinement, a cold, clean, odorless mirror waiting in the darkness to receive and hold the fragrant soul of the valley. The patience embedded in this winter preparation establishes the calm baseline for everything that follows. Each line scored by the comb creates a physical sanctuary for the future harvest, a silent home carved in white wax that will remain untouched until the first jasmine petal is delivered down the stone stairs. The artisan looks at the finished columns of frames with a sense of quiet fulfillment, knowing that the hard, cold labor of January has successfully created the soft, receptive cradle required for the warm, fragrant miracles of July. It is a long, beautifully unhurried dialogue between the seasons, held together by the steady hands of the craftsmen who understand that time is never an obstacle to be overcome, but an essential partner in the pursuit of absolute liquid perfection. Within the silent enclosure of the Grasse cellar, the transition of fragrance from the living flower to the resting fat is executed through a manual technique that represents the pinnacle of 19th-century artisanal precision. This work is performed by a specialized group of workers known as enfleuragistes, whose hands possess a level of sensitivity and speed that can only be acquired through a lifetime of dedicated apprenticeship. As you watch them through the warm, golden glow of the oil lamps, their movements appear almost mechanical in their regularity, yet they are infused with a profound intuitive respect for the delicate material they handle. There is no rushing, no frantic movement. Every gesture is calculated to maximize efficiency while maintaining an absolute unyielding gentleness. The process begins when a fresh column of stacked chassis is brought to the artisan's worktable. The enfleuragiste sits on a low, comfortable wooden bench, their posture aligned perfectly with the center of the frame to minimize physical strain over the long hours of the afternoon shift. With a smooth, practiced motion, they lift the top chassis from the stack and lay it flat upon the cherry wood table. The surface of the white fat, neatly scored with its parallel ridges, gleams under the amber light, waiting like a clean sheet of parchment. To the left of the artisan sits a shallow wicker tray filled with the morning's sorted jasmine blossoms, their white petals still crisp and cool from the subterranean air. Using a pair of long, slender tweezers made of springy German silver, or sometimes simply using the tips of their bare fingers if their skin is naturally cool, the artisan begins the placement of the flowers, a process known as piquetage. They pick up a single jasmine star by its tiny green calyx, never touching the delicate white petals themselves. With a swift downward motion, they press the flower into the fat, stem side down. The depth of the insertion must be perfect. The flower must be anchored firmly enough to prevent it from shifting when the frame is stacked vertically, yet it must not be pushed so deep that the fat completely covers the petals, which would suffocate the blossom and cause it to rot. The arrangement of the flowers across the chassis follows a strict, geometric grid pattern that has been calculated to optimize the spatial dynamics of absorption. The flowers are placed in parallel rows spaced precisely 1.5 centimeters apart from one another, in a staggered formation that resembles a miniature orchard seen from a high vantage point. This spacing ensures that each flower has its own dedicated zone of fat to interact with, preventing the volatile scent clouds of neighboring blossoms from overlapping and causing local saturation of the medium. The resulting pattern is visually stunning, a magnificent checkerboard tapestry of pure white stars set against a background of snowy, grooved fat, all contained within the heavy, dark frame of the oak chassis. The speed at which the enfleuragiste works is truly astonishing. Their hands move in a continuous rhythmic blur that is hypnotic to observe, a silent cadence that sounds like the gentle pattering of summer rain against a window pane as the flowers are tapped into place. Master artisan can completely cover a single 60-centimeter chassis frame with over 300 flowers in less than 3 minutes, their internal focus so profound that they rarely need to look away from the white canvas before them. They can tell instantly, through the subtle resistance of the fat against their fingertips or tweezers, if the medium is at the correct temperature or if a particular blossom carries too much hidden moisture. Once the surface of the frame is completely populated with its white inhabitants, the artisan lifts the next chassis from the stack and places it directly on top of the first. This action requires an immense amount of care. The frame must be lowered completely flat and vertically aligned with the lower one, ensuring that the inverted layer of fat on the bottom of the upper glass pane comes into close proximity with the tops of the flowers below without crushing them. The interlocking wooden lips of the two frames engage with a soft, solid thunk, sealing the microchamber and trapping the flowers within their dark, silent prison. The process is then repeated frame after frame until a new column of 30 or 40 chassis has been constructed, forming a vertical monument to human patience and precision. This manual labor continues throughout the long afternoon, a silent testament to the belief that the finest things in human culture can only be achieved through the direct, unmediated connection between the human hand and the materials of the earth. In 1885, as the wider industrial world turns increasingly toward iron machines, steam pistons, and mass production, the enfleurage cellar remains a proud, unyielding fortress of the human touch. The artisans know that a machine can never feel the delicate tension of a jasmine petal, can never judge the perfect depth of an insertion into a bed of winter fat, and can never invest the work with the quiet, soulful devotion that makes the final perfume an absolute work of art. The silence of the room deepens as the afternoon passes, underscored only by the tiny, rhythmic clicks of the tweezers and the soft breathing of the workers. Every completed frame is a silent victory over time, a beautiful arrangement of botanical stars captured in white wax that will sit undisturbed in the dark. The artisans work with a quiet pride, knowing that their individual muscle memory is the vital bridge between the fleeting beauty of the fields and the permanent luxury of the final extract. It is a slow meditative dance of the fingers, a sacred routine that honors the plant, respects the fat, and elevates the simple daily task into a profound act of artistic preservation that defines the very essence of grass. Deep within the dark, airtight chambers formed by the stacked columns of the chassis, the true mystery of enfleurage takes place in a condition of absolute undisturbed isolation. This is the phase of absorption, a silent molecular migration where the laws of organic chemistry operate with a slow, majestic certainty that defies human observation. For the next 24 to 72 hours, depending on the specific flower variety and the ambient humidity of the cellar, the jasmine blossoms will live their final, most extraordinary hours, executing a biological swan song that transforms their physical essence into an immortal sensory memory. To understand this alchemy, one must realize that a harvested jasmine flower is not dead. It remains a living, breathing biological organism for many hours after it has been separated from its parent bush on the sunny hillsides. Surrounded by the cool, humid air trapped within the chassis chamber, the flower continues its metabolic processes, drawing upon the sugar reserves stored within its thick, waxy petals. As it breathes in the dark, it continues to synthesize and secrete its volatile essential oils, channeling them through microscopic pores on the surface of the petals and releasing them into the tiny layer of air that separates the blossom from the surrounding fat. It is here that the physical properties of the purified core come into play with magnificent efficiency. The blend of pork lard and beef tallow possesses a natural high affinity for organic lipophilic molecules, meaning its chemical structure acts like a powerful, invisible magnet for the essential oil components released by the flower. As the scent molecules float into the confined airspace of the chamber, they are immediately drawn down into the grooved surface of the fat below them, as well as being pulled upward into the inverted layer of fat on the glass pane above. The fat matrix absorbs these molecules instantly, holding them captive within its long-chain lipid structures, preventing them from evaporating or breaking down in the air. This extraction process is entirely unique because it is cold and non-destructive, unlike steam distillation, which uses intense heat to rupture the plant cells and force the essential oils out, a violent method that often destroys the most delicate, heat-sensitive components of the fragrance, and enfleurage coaxes the scent out gently over time. It allows the flower to yield its treasure naturally at its own pace, resulting in a fragrance profile that is incredibly true to life, capturing the exact aroma of the living blossom as it opens on a cool summer night. The fat acts as a gentle passive recording device, capturing every nuance, every subtle top note, and every rich, deep undertone of the floral bouquet without altering a single chemical bond. As the hours pass in the dark, the appearance of the flowers within the chassis begins to undergo a profound transformation. The pristine, snowy white stars that were pressed into the fat with such precision during the afternoon gradually begin to lose their vitality. As their sugar reserves are depleted and their essential oils are completely drawn out by the surrounding lipid matrix, the petals lose their crisp elasticity, turning a soft, translucent yellow that resembles old parchment. They begin to shrink and shrivel, their edges curling inward as if they are folding themselves away into history. Yet even as their physical forms decay, their spiritual essence is transferred entirely into the white medium. The fat, once completely odorless, becomes heavily impregnated with the rich golden soul of the jasmine, changing its internal composition and developing a deep, complex fragrance that can be sensed even through the thick wooden walls of the frames. The master perfumer monitors this silent process with a regular, intuitive inspection. Every morning they enter the cellar with a small silver scoring knife and approach one of the resting columns. Carefully sliding out a single chassis frame from the middle of the stack, they bring it into the light of an oil lamp to observe the state of the blossoms. They do not need modern laboratory instruments to judge the progress of the absorption. They rely entirely on their own highly trained senses. They look at the color of the petals, touch the firmness of the fat with the tip of a bone spatula, and bend close to the frame to inhale the changing air, noting the exact balance between the fresh floral notes and the heavier underlying aroma of the fat matrix. If the master determines that the flowers have yielded everything they possess, the chassis is marked for the process of défleurage, where the old exhausted petals will be meticulously removed by hand to make way for a fresh harvest of newly picked blossoms. This cycle of placement, absorption, and removal will be repeated up to 30 times over the course of the summer season, using the exact same layer of fat. With each subsequent introduction of fresh flowers, the concentration of essential oils within the core increases exponentially, transforming the simple white fat into a highly saturated, precious substance known as the pommade. It is a process of accumulation, a slow, patient stacking of sensory layers that demonstrates how true depth and richness can only be achieved through the steady, unhurried accumulation of time. This dark, subterranean gestation is where the true value of the perfume is synthesized. The cellar acts as a silent womb, holding the volatile elements in perfect balance while the external world rushes forward. No mechanical acceleration can mimic this passive, beautiful translation of life into scent. The stone walls keep the temperature static, the dense wood blocks out the vibration of the streets, and the pristine fat bed waits with an endless, unyielding receptivity. It is a slow, quiet communion between the animal kingdom and the plant world. A chemical marriage facilitated by human hands that treats the short life of the blossom with the utmost reverence, ensuring its sweet passing breath is safely gathered and stored for generations to come. As the profound, silent hours of absorption reach their natural conclusion, a new rhythm must be introduced into the quiet sanctuary of the limestone refuge. The master perfumer, guided by an invisible internal clock calibrated by decades of sensory observation, determines the precise moment when the jasmine blossoms have surrendered the absolute entirety of their sweet breath. They have given everything they possess to the waiting lipid matrix, holding nothing back, leaving their physical forms entirely drained of the heavy, volatile oils that once defined their nocturnal blooming. This transition marks the beginning of défleurage, The meticulous, profoundly respectful process of removing the exhausted petals from their fatty cradle, a task that requires an entirely different physical cadence from the rapid, rhythmic placement of the previous afternoon. To observe a chassis frame immediately after the absorption phase is to witness a breathtaking tableau of botanical sacrifice. The flowers, which were pressed into the grooves as plump, radiant, snowy white stars, have undergone a complete and magnificent metamorphosis in the dark. They are now fragile, gossamer silhouettes of their former selves. Their petals have lost all of their crisp, fleshy turgidity, transforming into incredibly thin, translucent membranes that resemble the finest sheets of antique, sun-faded vellum. The pure white coloration has faded entirely, replaced by a soft, pale, golden-yellow hue, their delicate edges curling slightly inward, like the resting wings of a dormant moth. They appear almost weightless, suspended against the white background, a visual poetry of beautiful exhaustion that signifies the successful transfer of their invisible soul into the permanent memory of the pommade. The extraction of these fragile ghosts from the surface of the fat is an operation of extreme delicacy, designed to dislodge the organic material without disturbing the delicate, grooved topography of the saturated medium. The enfleuragista approaches the worktable with a serene, unhurried focus. They lift the heavy oak chassis from the resting stack, their hands grasping the thick wooden sides with a practiced, stabilizing strength. Instead of picking the flowers out one by one, which would be impossibly tedious and risk gouging the soft fat with a sharp tool, the artisan employs a technique based entirely on the subtle manipulation of physical vibration. Holding the frame vertically over a wide, shallow collection basket lined with tightly woven hemp cloth, the worker begins to tap the heavy wooden edge of the chassis against the thick leather apron protecting their knees. This tapping is not forceful, but it is deeply, rhythmically resonant. It creates a low, muffled, percussive heartbeat that travels effortlessly through the dense, aged grain of the oak and transfers directly into the thick pane of hand-blown plate glass. The vibration ripples across the surface of the fat in microscopic, invisible waves because the exhausted flowers have lost their moisture and their supple weight. Their physical bond to the fat has weakened considerably. As the rhythmic tapping continues, the tiny green calyxes slowly loosen their grip on the lipid matrix. One by one, with a breathtaking silent grace, the golden parchment-like blossoms simply detach from the white wall and begin to fall into the waiting basket below. The sound of these thousands of spent blossoms cascading down onto the woven hemp cloth is one of the most hypnotic, soothing acoustics within the entire cellar. It does not sound like a heavy agricultural harvest. Rather, it resembles the soft, dry, rustling whisper of a gentle autumn breeze blowing through a forest of ancient birch trees, or the comforting, continuous murmur of fine sand sifting slowly through an hourglass. It is a dry, papery rain that speaks of peaceful completion and quiet rest. The artisan maintains the gentle tapping rhythm, turning the heavy oak frame slowly in their hands, angling it perfectly so that gravity assists in the soft descent of the flowers, ensuring that every corner of the glass pane is cleared of its delicate clinging passengers. Inevitably, a few stubborn petals may refuse to fall, clinging to the slightly softened edges of the fat where their remaining moisture has created a minute, invisible seal. For these lingering stragglers, the artisan abandons the tapping and takes up a specialized instrument designed solely for this purpose. It is a long, impossibly thin needle carved from a single dense splinter of boxwood, its surface polished by years of friction against the thumb and forefinger until it shines like aged ivory. With a steady, microscopic precision that rivals the work of a master watchmaker, the enfleuragiste slips the tip of the wooden needle just beneath the curled edge of the stubborn petal, lifting it cleanly away from the fat without leaving so much as a microscopic scratch on the white surface below. It is absolutely imperative that every single fragment of organic matter is removed. If even a minuscule speck of plant tissue is left behind to decompose within the fat, it could introduce a note of fermentation that would forever taint the pristine purity of the final perfume. Once the frame is completely cleared, it is laid flat upon the wild cherry wood table beneath the amber glow of the oil lamp, revealing the transformed landscape of the medium. The fat is no longer the completely uniform blank canvas it was on the first day. It now bears the physical, microscopic memory of the flowers that rested upon it. The surface is completely covered in a mesmerizing array of tiny concave indentations, a vast miniature lunar landscape of soft craters where the green bases of the jasmine blossoms were anchored. The grooved ridges, originally sharply defined by the wooden comb, have softened slightly, their edges melted and smoothed by the slow, continuous exhalation of the living plants. The most profound change, however, is olfactory and chemical. The fat itself has begun its long, glorious transition into the pommade. It has lost its stark, blinding whiteness, taking on a very faint, warm, pearlescent ivory tone, a visual indicator of the rich essential oils that have successfully migrated into its molecular structure. As the artisan leans over the freshly cleared frame, the scent that rises from the surface is utterly magnificent. It is no longer just the light, ephemeral sweetness of a fresh flower. It has become something deeper, creamier, and infinitely more grounded. The fragrance is anchored by the dense, buttery weight of the purified animal fats, creating a luxurious, velvet-textured aroma that feels physically heavy as it enters the lungs, slowing the breath and inducing an immediate sensation of profound, heavy-lidded relaxation. The exhausted blossoms, now gathered in deep golden mounds within the wide hemp baskets, are not treated as mere waste. In the beautifully enclosed cyclical ecosystem of the Grasse hillsides, nothing is ever truly discarded or forgotten. These spent petals, having donated their invisible aromatic souls to the perfume industry, still possess a vital physical purpose. The baskets are carried up the cool stone stairs and loaded back onto the small wooden carts. They will be taken back up the winding, sun-drenched paths to the very terraces from which they were picked. There they will be gently folded back into the dark, crumbly, iron-rich earth, acting as a rich organic compost that will nourish the root systems of the ancient jasmine bushes, ensuring that the soil remains fertile and strong for the coming years. This beautiful, unbroken circle of life and labour is the philosophical heart of the 1885 enfleurage process. The flower gives its scent to the cellar and its body back to the mountain, an eternal loop of generosity and renewal that requires no machinery, no rush, and no artificial intervention. The artisans understand that they are merely quiet facilitators of this natural grace. As the cleared chassis frame is moved down the worktable to receive its next application of freshly harvested dew-kissed buds, the cellar settles back into its familiar, unhurried cadence. The space has been cleared, the fat has been deepened, and the invisible architecture of the summer's ultimate fragrance continues to be built, one slow, silent, microscopic layer at a time. Within the protective, vaulted quiet of the subterranean cellar, the relationship between the human hand and the delicate botanical matter is mediated by a highly specialized collection of artisanal instruments. These tools, resting with geometric precision upon the burnished surface of the master's wild cherry wood table, are not the cold, anonymous products of distant industrial factories. In the year 1885, every instrument utilized in the pursuit of absolute fragrance is a bespoke masterpiece, forged, carved, and meticulously balanced by local craftsmen who understand the profound gravity of the enfleurage process. To observe these implements under the soft, flickering amber illumination of the rapeseed oil lamps is to look upon a tangible history of physical labor. They are extensions of the artisan's own body, ergonomic bridges designed to cross the vast sensory divide between the coarse, heavy reality of the human touch and the microscopic, ethereal fragility of a single jasmine petal. Over decades of daily repetitive use, these tools have transcended their raw materials, absorbing the natural oils of the hands that wield them, warming to the specific temperature of the cellar and developing a luminous patina that speaks of profound, quiet devotion. The most frequently employed instrument in this silent choreography is the pince d'enfleurage, the exceptionally long, slender forceps used to lift and place the freshly harvested blossoms. These tweezers are forged from a specialized, non-reactive alloy known as German silver, a pristine amalgamation of copper, zinc, and nickel that possesses a distinctly cool, silky presence when resting against the skin. The metal is highly polished, reflecting the ambient light in long, thin needles of silver brilliance that dance across the dark flagstones whenever the artisan moves. The design of the pincers is a marvel of localized engineering. The spring tension held within the curved upper joint is calibrated to absolute perfection, requiring only the faintest contraction of the finger muscles to bring the tips together. This precise resistance ensures that the worker's hand will not succumb to fatigue even after executing thousands of rhythmic movements over the course of a long afternoon. The very tips of the prongs are flattened into microscopic spatulas, their inner surfaces scored with fine, horizontal ridges. These ridges softly yet securely grip the minuscule green stem of the flower without threatening to crush the living tissue. When tapped together, the prongs emit a faint, incredibly high musical clink, a pure note that occasionally punctuates the heavy silence of the workspace. Lying parallel to the silver pincers are the paroirs, the broad, flat-bladed spatulas essential for manipulating the purified fats and scraping the saturated pommade from the glass chassis. These tools are crafted from materials chosen specifically for their organic warmth and their absolute inability to scratch the hand-blown plate glass. The most prized among them are carved from the dense, white ribs of locally raised oxen, or from smooth, flexible lengths of antique whalebone brought back from distant maritime voyages. Unlike metal, which can turn brutally cold in the subterranean dampness, bone remains remarkably temperate, instantly matching the gentle warmth of the human hand that holds it. Over years of sliding across the cool surfaces of the fat, the bone absorbs microscopic amounts of the lard and tallow, transforming its appearance from a stark chalky white into a rich, translucent, buttery yellow that resembles old polished ivory. The handle of the spatula is made from an incredibly dense wood, such as African ebony or local boxwood, secured to the bone blade with tiny flush-hammered brass rivets. Running your thumb along the wooden handle, you would feel the subtle indentations worn perfectly into the grain by the persistent pressure of the master's grip. Tool of equal importance, though utilized less frequently, is the grattoir, the beautiful architectural wooden comb used to score the parallel furrows into the newly laid fat. This instrument is always carved from a single, solid block of aged olive wood sourced from the ancient twisting groves that line the northern slopes of the Grasse Valley. Olive wood is chosen for its extraordinarily tight, interlocking grain, which makes it virtually impervious to splintering, and for its naturally high oil content, which prevents the sticky animal fat from adhering to its surfaces. The handle is deeply contoured, designed to fill the entire palm, allowing the artisan to exert a perfectly even, downward pressure as they pull the tool across the glass pane. The bottom edge of the grattoir features a row of perfectly uniform square-cut teeth exactly 2 millimeters wide and 2 millimeters deep. When drawn through the virgin fat, the comb produces a deeply satisfying, soft, yielding sound, a rich, muffled brushing noise that sounds like a heavy velvet curtain being drawn slowly across a wooden stage. It leaves behind a flawless landscape of miniature ridges and valleys, a meticulously ploughed white field ready to receive its aromatic seeds. Surrounding the worktable are the vessels of transport, the deep, wide-mouthed baskets known as mannequins, woven from a mixture of wild river willow and thick, fibrous hemp. These baskets are breathable, flexible micro-environments designed to protect the fragile harvest during its journey from the fields to the underground sanctuary. The weaving is done entirely by the elderly craftsmen of the village, whose gnarled, experienced hands twist the soaked willow shoots into intricate, incredibly strong hexagonal patterns. The willow retains a beautiful pale green flexibility, smelling sharply of wet riverbanks and cool rushing water. The bottom of each basket is lined with a tight lattice of natural hemp rope, providing a soft, suspended floor that absorbs the shock of the donkey carts and prevents the flowers at the bottom of the pile from being crushed. As the artisan reaches into the basket to gather a handful of blossoms, the woven willow flexes and groans with a soft, dry, creaking sound, a rustic voice that echoes the agricultural origins of the precious cargo. Over the course of a summer season, the pale willow darkens to a deep golden brown as it slowly absorbs the residual essential oils of the millions of jasmine flowers it has cradled. The physical relationship between the artisan and these specialized instruments concludes each day with a quiet, meditative ritual of purification and maintenance. As the final chassis frame is stacked and the heavy oak door of the cellar prepares to be closed for the night, the master perfumer does not simply abandon their tools upon the cherry wood table. Instead, they produce a small square cloth of the finest, softest unbleached linen and a tiny corked glass vial containing pure sweet almond oil. Taking up each instrument one by one, the master meticulously wipes away any microscopic trace of fat, moisture, or plant matter. The silver pincers are polished until they gleam with a flawless intensity. The bone spatulas are rubbed gently, their smooth yellowed surfaces glowing under the friction of the cloth. The olive wood comb is brushed clean, ensuring not a single speck of wax remains trapped between its square-cut teeth. Single drop of golden almond oil is applied to the metal spring and rubbed into the dark wood, nourishing the materials and preventing the subterranean dampness from causing rust or rot. Finally, the tools are laid to rest within a specially tailored pouch of soft chamois leather. This deeply respectful, unhurried maintenance guarantees that when the artisan returns the following afternoon, their instruments will be waiting in a state of absolute readiness. The quiet sanctuary of the Enfleurage Cellar is not an empty, echoing vault, but a living space inhabited by a community whose physical presence is as meticulously controlled as the resting pommade. The men and women who labor in this subterranean environment navigate their duties wrapped in garments specifically chosen to respect the absolute purity of the room. The women, the highly skilled enfleuragistes, wear long, sweeping skirts of heavy, unbleached cotton that fall almost to the cold flagstones over their shoulders to ward off the perpetual chill that emanates from the limestone walls. They drape thick, woven shawls of natural sheep's wool, undyed and carrying a very faint, comforting scent of the high mountain pastures. To ensure that their footfalls do not create vibrations that might disturb the delicately layered chassis frames, every worker discards their heavy leather-soled street boots before crossing the threshold. In their place, they wear soft, traditional espadrilles, simple shoes crafted from tough braided jute soles and woven canvas uppers. When these soft shoes glide across the irregular calcite-veined limestone floor, they produce a continuous rhythmic sound that is incredibly soothing. It is not a harsh clatter, but a soft, fibrous brushing noise, a sound like dry grass grazing against a stone wall in a gentle wind. This hushed, sliding locomotion sets a deeply hypnotic pace for the entire room, forcing everyone to move with a deliberate, gliding grace that naturally slows the heart rate and deepens the breath of anyone observing them. Communication within this dimly lit workspace is conducted through a unique auditory restraint. There are no sudden shouts, no sharp bursts of laughter, and no harsh ringing voices to shatter the heavy velvet silence. The workers converse almost exclusively in the musical, rolling cadences of the traditional Provençal dialect, a language that feels inherently softer and more rounded than formal French. When they speak, it is in a low, continuous murmur, their voices dropping to an intimate, breathy register that barely travels beyond the edge of their own wooden worktables. The phonetic structure of their whispered conversations is filled with soft sibilants, gentle vowel sounds, and slow rhythmic pauses that seamlessly blend into the ambient acoustics of the cellar. To listen to them from the far corner of the room is like listening to the gentle bubbling of a distant brook or the murmur of pine needles swaying in a dense forest. This hushed vocal environment is entirely intentional. Loud noises would cause abrupt exhalations and stir up hidden dust, while the very act of speaking softly requires a calm, measured breath that keeps the mind anchored in the present moment. The social bonds forged in this quiet way are incredibly profound, built on a foundation of shared, silent understanding, where a simple, slow nod or the gentle passing of a silver tool conveys volumes of respect. The profound dedication to the craft extends far beyond the physical boundaries of the cellar walls, dictating the most intimate sensory habits of the workers' daily lives. To work in the world of high perfumery in 1885 is to take a vow of olfactory purity. The artisans know that their noses are their most vital instruments, and they protect their delicate olfactory epithelium with absolute uncompromising rigor. In a region famous for its robust, garlic-heavy cuisine, the cellar workers adhere to an incredibly bland, almost monastic diet during the long months of the summer harvest. The consumption of raw onions, sharp spices, cured meats, and strong red wines is strictly forbidden, as the volatile compounds from these foods would eventually exude from their pores, tainting the pristine air of the workspace. Their midday meal, taken above ground in the bright courtyard far from the open ventilation shafts, consists of plain, crusty hearth bread, mild, fresh goat cheese, and perhaps a simple unsalted broth. They drink only pure, cold water drawn straight from the deep artesian wells. This sensory deprivation ensures that when they descend back into the amber gloom of the cellar, their palates are completely neutral and hypersensitive to the most minuscule fluctuations in the fragrance of the blooming jasmine. Presiding over this hushed subterranean society is the solitary figure of the maître parfumeur, the master whose decades of cultivated intuition guide the entire choreography of the house. He does not sit at a fixed station, nor does he engage in the repetitive labor of the piquetage. Instead, he executes a slow, continuous patrol through the narrow, labyrinthine corridors formed by the towering columns of chassis. He is an elder statesman of scent, dressed impeccably in a fine, dark worsted wool frock coat, a garment that absorbs the chill of the room while projecting an aura of quiet authority. As he walks, his hands are clasped behind his back, his posture perfectly upright, his movements possessing the slow, deliberate majesty of a deep-water vessel moving through a calm harbour. The master rarely needs to speak to correct a worker. His guidance is an exercise in microscopic, non-verbal communication. He will pause behind an apprentice, lean forward infinitesimally, and close his eyes, flaring his nostrils just a fraction of a millimetre to inhale the invisible aura rising from the specific frame. If the work is flawless, he will offer a single, slow blink, a deeply comforting gesture of approval before gliding silently onward into the shadows. Woven through the spaces left by the master and the artisans is the invisible, tireless labour of the gaitesauces, the young apprentices who form the foundational layer of the cellar's social hierarchy. These boys, often no more than 12 years old, are the lifeblood of the logistical operation. Yet, despite their youth, they have been trained to suppress every urge to rush or clatter. They are the silent shadows of the workshop, hauling heavy, sloshing buckets of ice-cold spring water from the surface fountains, their young muscles straining under the weight, yet their footsteps remaining entirely muffled. They are tasked with the meditative duty of sweeping the flagstones with wide, soft-bristled brooms made of dried heather, gathering up any stray fallen petal with a slow, rhythmic, side-to-side motion that resembles an elegant dance. Their faces are set in expressions of solemn concentration, mimicking the quiet dignity of their elders as they absorb the secret rhythms of the trade. They represent the future of Grasse, learning that true mastery begins with the humble, silent maintenance of the space. As the long golden afternoon finally begins to dissolve into the deep indigo twilight of the evening, a subtle collective shift ripples through the social fabric of the cellar. The work does not stop abruptly, it unwinds, slowing down like a beautifully engineered brass clockwork coming to the end of its tension. The final frames are stacked, the wooden combs are wiped clean, and the heavy linen cloths are draped meticulously over the worktables. Before anyone ascends the stone stairs to the surface, the workers engage in a final communal ritual of purification. At the far end of the cellar stands a long trough carved from dark granite, fed by a trickling pipe of pure mountain water. One by one, in patient silence, the artisans approach the basin to wash their hands. They use a special soap crafted from pure, unscented olive oil, rubbing it until it produces a thin, milky lather. The water is startlingly cold, washing away the sticky residue of the animal fats and the invisible film of the essential oils. This simple, tactile routine acts as a psychological boundary, a physical shedding of the day's intense focus. Emerging from the dark, fragrant womb of the cellar into the cool streets of the town, they leave behind an environment of perfect, undisturbed preservation, carrying with them the quiet satisfaction of a day lived in absolute harmony. Beyond the immensely thick protective limestone walls of this subterranean sanctuary, the world of 1885 is hurtling forward into an era entirely defined by a frantic mechanical acceleration. It is an age suddenly obsessed with the fierce conquest of distance and the ruthless compression of hours, a time when massive iron-forged steam engines are violently carving their way through ancient valleys, and copper telegraph wires are beginning to stitch distant continents together with the invisible, frantic pulse of electrical urgency. The skies of the great cities are growing dark with the heavy, acrid soot of industrial coal, and the human mind is being conditioned to worship the gods of speed, efficiency, and deafening visible output. Yet, to step across the threshold into the deep, quiet isolation of the Grasse Enfleurage Cellar is to cross a profound philosophical border. Here, time is not viewed as a hostile adversary to be outrun, nor is it a resource to be aggressively managed, quantified, and exhausted. Instead, within this dark, velvet-draped acoustic womb, time is treated with absolute reverence. It is recognized as the single most vital, irreplaceable ingredient in the pursuit of absolute perfection. Time here is allowed to pool, to thicken, and to rest, moving not in straight, desperate lines, but in slow, beautiful, repetitive circles that echo the gentle changing of the mountain seasons. The physical manifestation of this alternative temporal philosophy is mounted against the broad, raw surface of the central molasses rock pillar. It is a grand antique regulator clock, housed within a magnificent casing of dark, heavily oiled mahogany. This clock does not feature the ticking seconds hand that would soon come to tyrannize the modern world. Its face enameled in a soft, chalky white that perfectly matches the surrounding stone walls, displays only two elegant, slender hands of blued steel, indicating the slow passage of the hours and the minutes. But it is the pendulum that commands a hypnotic, meditative attention. Suspended on a rod of seasoned oak, the heavy brass bob swings back and forth with a majestic, unyielding deliberation. As it catches the subdued luminescence of the room, the polished brass throws a faint, moving crescent of light across the floorboards. The sound of the escapement mechanism is a deep, metallic thunk, 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 a slow, steady heartbeat that travels through the damp air and vibrates subtly within the chest of anyone who stands quietly in the room. This rhythmic acoustic pulse does not induce panic. It induces a profound, heavy-lidded calm. It is a comforting, parental assurance that the universe is functioning precisely as it should, one quiet, unhurried moment at a time. The artisans do not look at this clock to see how much time they have lost. They listen to it to anchor themselves in the deep, sustaining ocean of the present. To truly understand the soul of the enfleurage process, one must embrace a philosophy of profound, unwavering trust in the invisible, microscopic movements of nature. In the rushing world above, progress must be seen to be believed. It must manifest as towering steel bridges or mountains of extracted coal. But inside the dark, airtight microclimates of the stacked oak chassis, the most miraculous transformation is occurring in complete pitch-black silence, utterly hidden from the human eye. The migration of the volatile scent molecules from the wilting, parchment-like petals of the jasmine into the cool, receptive matrix of the purified animal fat is a journey measured in fractions of a millimeter. It is a quiet chemical migration that cannot be forced, cannot be rushed, and cannot be improved by the application of heat, steam, or pressure. The master perfumer and their apprentices must simply prepare the stage with flawless precision, assemble the materials with absolute cleanliness, and then surrender to the waiting. They must practice the immensely difficult, beautiful art of allowing things to be. In a century that is rapidly forgetting how to sit still, the cellar stands as a temple of active, devoted patience, a place where the highest form of human labor is the silent act of standing guard, while nature executes its own mysterious, unhurried alchemy. This philosophy of stillness naturally extends into a deep meditative reflection on the nature of mortality, preservation, and the fleeting beauty of the physical world. The life of a single Grasse jasmine blossom is heartbreakingly brief. It spends months slowly gathering the energy of the Mediterranean sun, carefully forming its delicate green sepals, and drawing water from the deep limestone aquifers, all in preparation for a single glorious night of blooming. When it finally opens its 5 white petals to the cool twilight, it releases its entire aromatic soul into the air, a breathtaking display of biological generosity that lasts for mere hours before the intense heat of the following morning would wither it into brown dust. The enfleurage cellar exists entirely to intercept this tragic, beautiful brevity. It is a magnificent apparatus designed to cheat the wind and rob the sun of its destructive power. By pressing the newly opened blossom into the fat at the precise zenith of its vitality, the artisan halts the process of decay. They offer the flower a strange, beautiful form of immortality, capturing its final, sweetest breath and holding it suspended within a permanent lipid stasis. When you contemplate the towering stacks of resting frames in the shadows, you are not merely looking at wooden boxes filled with fat and wilting vegetation. You are looking at a vast physical archive of captured time. Every micro-layer of the pommade holds the concentrated essence of a specific summer night that has long since passed into history. The fragrance suspended within the wax is the ghost of a breeze that blew across the Plateau de Cossols, the memory of a silver fog that rolled up from the Mediterranean Sea, and the silent testament of the calloused hands that plucked the star from its bush. To extract this pommade, to wash it in alcohol and filter it into a crystal flaken, is to create a liquid time machine. Years, perhaps decades later, a woman in a distant, snow-covered city might unstop that glass vial, and in that singular, breathtaking moment of inhalation, the entire landscape of an 1885 Grasse summer will bloom miraculously around her, perfectly preserved, defying the steady, erosive march of the years. The philosophy of the cellar is ultimately one of deep, romantic defiance, a quiet, stubborn belief that true beauty, though inherently fragile and fleeting, can be caught, cradled, and carried safely through the dark corridors of time. As you allow the profound peace of this philosophical stillness to wash over you, let your own internal rhythms align with the heavy, sweeping brass pendulum of the central clock. There is absolutely no need to rush, no need to measure your worth by the speed of your movements, and no need to participate in the frantic, mechanical anxiety of the modern age. The air you are breathing is thick, protective, and infinitely slow. Imagine the invisible, heavy scent of the resting jasmine slowly migrating into the quiet spaces of your own mind, softening the sharp edges of your thoughts, and absorbing every lingering trace of daily tension. You are anchored in a sanctuary where patience is the highest virtue and where the gentle, unhurried passage of the hours is a beautiful, comforting melody. Let your pulse slow to match the distant, muffled dripping of the natural spring water in the corner basin, each drop a tiny, perfect measure of a world that is perfectly content to wait, to rest, and to breathe in the dark. The cellar holds you just as gently and safely as the white wax holds the delicate petals, promising a long, deep, and beautifully preserved stillness as the narrative drifts ever closer toward the edge of sleep. To dwell within the heavy subterranean walls of the Grasse Enfleurage Cellar is to embrace a profound aesthetic paradox, a philosophical gentleness that sits at the very heart of the perfumer's art. The artisans who inhabit this space labor with the densest, most intensely physical materials the earth has to offer. They gently manipulate vast quantities of heavy, purified animal fats. They haul slow, sloshing buckets of freezing mountain water, and they maneuver towering stacks of solid oak chassis that groan softly under their own immense weight. Yet the ultimate objective of all this monumental physical exertion, this endless arrangement of heavy, tangible matter, is the creation of something completely weightless, utterly formless, and entirely invisible. Unlike the master sculptor who leaves behind a towering monument of polished marble, or the brilliant painter who coats a canvas with thick, textured layers of vibrant, enduring pigment, the master perfumer creates a masterpiece that cannot be seen by the eye, cannot be held in the hand, and cannot be hung upon a gallery wall. Their life's work is an ethereal spirit, an invisible breath that exists solely in the fleeting space between an exhalation and an inhalation. This dedication to the unseen requires a unique type of philosophical humility, a willingness to pour one's entire soul into a medium that leaves no physical shadow, no visual monument, and no permanent shape in the material world. It is the art of crafting pure atmosphere, a quiet departure from the human desire for solid, undeniable permanence, favoring instead a gentle, lingering memory. This inherent invisibility of the medium is intimately tied to a beautiful, profound anonymity that blankets the entire community of workers. In the grand ateliers of Paris or the bustling art studios of Florence, the ego of the creator is paramount. Every brushstroke is signed, every marble base is chiseled with a name, and every creation is designed to elevate the individual genius of the artist into the annals of enduring fame. But here, in the dim, amber-lit shadows of the 1885 cellar, personal pride is entirely, willingly surrendered to the quiet majesty of the flower. The names of the young women who woke before dawn to pick the blossoms with such gentle dexterity will never be known to the wider world. The identities of the journeymen who washed the fat 20 times in freezing water, or the young boys who swept the flagstones with dried heather brooms, will never be recorded on the final glittering crystal flaken. Even the master perfumer whose sensory wisdom orchestrates this entire magnificent symphony of extraction will remain an anonymous guardian to the person who eventually wears the fragrance. The only place their existences are noted is within the heavy leather-bound ledgers resting upon the cherry-wood table, pages of thick cotton rag paper covered in fading, sepia-toned ink, detailing the weight of the daily harvest, the ambient temperature of the room, and perhaps a set of elegant, looping initials marking a completed batch. They do not work for personal glory. They work for the continuation of a silent legacy. As you rest your mind upon this concept of an invisible legacy, consider the incredible spatial and social journey that awaits the quiet product of this rustic, subterranean womb. The essence that is currently sleeping beneath the layer of white fat, surrounded by rough masonry, damp earth, and the scent of burning rapeseed oil, is destined for a world of unimaginable, contrasting opulence. Months from now, after the pommade has been washed in alcohol, chilled with alpine ice and filtered through fine parchment, the resulting golden absolute will be decanted into a masterpiece of heavy-cut crystal. That crystal flaken will travel far from the quiet valleys of Provence. It will find itself resting upon a polished mahogany vanity table in a grand velvet-draped boudoir in Paris, or perhaps sitting beside a silver-backed mirror in a quiet, snow-covered mansion in Vienna. The contrast is a beautiful philosophical poetry. The rough, calloused hands of the Grasse artisans have silently birthed a luxury that will eventually graze the soft, powdered pulse points of European nobility. The fragrance will fill grand, glittering ballrooms illuminated by thousands of soft wax candles. It will weave its way through the rustling folds of heavy silk gowns and fine velvet dinner jackets. It will linger in the hushed, intimate corners of horse-drawn carriages drifting through the midnight streets of distant capitals. Yet no matter how far it travels, the very soul of that invisible aura will always remain tethered to the quiet, dark dampness of this very cellar. This invisible thread of fragrance creates one of the most intimate yet entirely unspoken connections in human existence, a connection forged purely through the deep subconscious act of breathing. When a person standing in a distant city, perhaps decades in the future, removes the crystal stopper from the bottle and takes a slow, deep breath, they are not merely smelling a pleasant arrangement of botanical oils, they are directly inhaling the preserved atmosphere of this specific 1885 afternoon. They are breathing in the gentle Mediterranean sun that warmed the soil, the cool, salty fog that rolled up from the sea, and the absolute unhurried patience of the master perfumer who stood guard over the resting frames. The artisan and the wearer, separated by vast oceans of time and physical geography, are united in a singular, beautiful moment of shared respiration. The creator breathed out their dedication, their skill, and their quiet, focused energy into the white wax, and the wearer breathes it back in, absorbing the emotional and historical weight of the cellar directly into their own physical body. It is a form of silent, invisible time travel, a bridge built of microscopic molecules that bypasses the logical thinking brain and speaks directly to the deep, ancient, emotional centers of the soul. To understand this is to realize that the perfumer is bottling an emotion, capturing a fleeting instance of profound natural peace, and sending it forward into the future as a quiet, invisible gift to an unknown dreamer. Let your awareness drift slowly back from those distant, glittering ballrooms and future cities, returning gently to the grounding, physical reality of the cellar as the afternoon deepens into evening. The philosophy of the invisible legacy is not a restless thought, but a deeply comforting blanket that settles softly over the mind, encouraging a state of profound, peaceful surrender. The workers have all departed, leaving the subterranean sanctuary to its intended magnificent isolation. The amber flames of the small, unglazed clay lamps have been trimmed low, casting long, wavering, protective shadows that stretch across the herringbone brick ceiling like soft, dark wings. The heavy oak chassis frames, stacked in their towering silent columns, stand like monuments to this invisible art, their rough-hewn edges softened by the enveloping gloom. Inside them, trapped between the smooth panes of watery green glass, the mysterious microscopic migration of scent continues entirely unseen, a quiet miracle unfolding in the dark. The air in the room is impossibly thick, saturated with the dual presence of raw, earthy moisture and the intoxicating heavy sweetness of the resting jasmine. As you draw this air slowly into your lungs, let it carry the profound peace of the artisans into your own spirit. They understood that the greatest works of life do not need to be loud or celebrated by the masses. The deepest beauty often lies in the quietest acts of preservation. Surrender your own need to be seen, and let your consciousness dissolve smoothly into the vast protective quiet. The cellar now exists in a state of absolute profound isolation, having fully surrendered to the deep, enveloping mantle of the tranquil Provençal night. The heavy iron-bound oak door at the top of the worn stone stairs has been firmly closed and bolted, the massive wrought iron deadbolt sliding into its ancient stone housing with a low, satisfying thud that seals away the cooling breezes of the hillside and locks the subterranean chamber into its own private, unchanging atmosphere. Without the gentle, rhythmic sliding of the canvas espadrilles across the flagstones, or the soft, sibilant murmurs of the artisans weaving through the narrow aisles, the silence of the room expands and deepens, filling every arched crevice. It does not feel empty, rather it feels incredibly full, thick and heavy with the invisible, lingering energies of the day's meticulous labor. The philosophy of this resting space turns now to the profound relationship between human memory and the invisible architecture of scent. Why do we go to such extraordinary lengths, quarrying deep mountain stone, carving dense oak, painstakingly purifying winter fats, and tending fragile nocturnal blossoms merely to capture a passing fragrance? The answer lies in the deep, ancient, and almost magical connection between our olfactory senses and the hidden, guarded vaults of human remembrance. To breathe in the still air of this cellar is to understand that scent is the ultimate, unrivaled master of time. Consider the simple, automatic act of drawing a breath within this darkened, velvet-draped room. As you slowly inhale, drawing the cool, heavily perfumed air through your nose, you are not merely taking in oxygen to sustain your physical body. You are inhaling a complex, invisible tapestry of microscopic botanical molecules, each one a perfectly formed molecular key designed to unlock the deepest, most heavily guarded doors of the human mind. Unlike the senses of sight or hearing, which are dutifully processed by the logical, analytical, and constantly judging centers of the brain, the sense of smell possesses a secret, ancient pathway. It completely bypasses the rational mind, traveling straight into the limbic system, the primal, emotional core of our being where our deepest loves, our quietest fears, and our most cherished, faded memories are permanently stored. This biological reality elevates the work of the Grasse artisans from a simple process of agricultural extraction to a profound, almost spiritual form of emotional engineering. They are not merely preserving a pleasant smell to mask the odors of the world. They are deliberately cultivating and bottling pure, unadulterated nostalgia. They are carefully crafting the invisible keys that will one day unlock the forgotten summers, the lost romances, and the distant childhoods of 1,000 unknown lives. To contemplate this invisible power while resting in the quiet, undisturbed shadows of the cellar is to experience a deep, philosophical humility. single fleeting drop of the jasmine absolute that is currently gestating within the white, grooved walls of the pommade contains a psychological power that rivals the greatest literature or the most majestic, sweeping symphonies. A person may read 1,000 pages of detailed history and feel only a detached intellectual curiosity about the past. But if that same person is suddenly struck by the specific heavy indole-rich sweetness of a grassy jasmine blooming in the night air, they are instantly, violently and beautifully transported across time and space. The rational mind is rendered entirely helpless. In a mere fraction of a second, that heavy scent can resurrect the exact golden warmth of a forgotten July evening, the dry, rhythmic sound of crickets hidden in the tall meadow grass, the incredibly specific feeling of a loved one's hand resting upon a shoulder, and the beautiful, touching innocence of a past self that was thought to be lost forever. The scent does not merely describe the past, it resurrects it, whole and breathing, pulling the beautiful ghost of the memory directly into the physical present. The cellar, therefore, is not a factory. It is a grand, sleeping library of raw, unwritten emotion, waiting patiently in the dark to be read by the unconscious minds of the future. This profound emotional resonance is intimately connected to the philosophical harmony of opposites that governs the entire enfleurage process. The creation of the perfect pommade requires a beautiful, necessary marriage between the extreme poles of the natural world. On one side we have the fierce, vibrant, intensely ephemeral energy of the summer harvest, the delicate jasmine flowers born of the blinding Mediterranean sun and the warm, heavy coastal humidity, representing the fleeting beauty of life at its absolute, most fragile peak. On the other side, we have the cold, dense, incredibly stable reality of the winter fats, the purified lard and tallow rendered in the freezing, dormant months of January, representing the enduring, silent, unyielding preservation of the cold season. The art of enfleurage brings these two dramatically opposing forces together within the dark, silent microclimate of the chassis frame. The winter fat reaches out and gently embraces the summer blossom, offering its own heavy, grounded stability to anchor the flower's light, volatile, drifting soul. It is a poetic reconciliation of the seasons, a physical demonstration that true permanence can only be achieved when the heavy and the light, the cold and the warm, the eternal and the ephemeral, are allowed to rest together in perfect, undisturbed symbiotic balance. As the night deepens overhead, this philosophical balance becomes physically palpable within the heavy atmosphere of the room. The air temperature stabilizes to a flawless, cool equilibrium, protected from the rapid freezing temperature drops of the outside hillsides by the immense thermal mass of the molasses rock pillars and the arched terracotta brick ceilings. The residual warmth from the day's harsh sunlight, absorbed by the upper walls of the manor house, slowly conducts downward through the stone over the course of the night, ensuring that the cellar never grows completely cold, but maintains a soft, cellar-cool gentleness that perfectly mirrors the soothing temperature of resting human skin. The small, unglazed clay oil lamps, trimmed low by the master before his quiet departure, burn with a slow, steady, unwavering devotion. Their small amber flames cast a warm, protective glow that illuminates the tiny dust motes dancing lazily in the still air, throwing long, soft, undulating shadows across the hand-blown plate glass of the stacked frames. The scent of the burning rapeseed oil, a faint, toasted, slightly nutty aroma, weaves itself beautifully through the heavy, narcotic sweetness of the resting jasmine, creating a complex, richly layered atmospheric lullaby that wraps around the exhausted mind like a heavy, soft velvet blanket. Allow your own racing thoughts to dissolve completely into this beautiful, invisible chemistry of the night. Just as the winter fat passively absorbs the essential oils of the flower without effort, without strain, and without struggle, let your mind become completely receptive, absorbing the deep, heavy, ancient stillness of the room. There is no need to actively chase sleep, just as there is no need to force the scent from the delicate petal. Sleep, like the perfect floral extraction, is a natural, graceful process that occurs only when we surrender our conscious resistance and allow ourselves to simply rest in the dark. Let your breathing mirror the slow, eternal, majestic swing of the great brass pendulum clock on the central pillar. With every slow, deep inhalation, draw in the cool, fragrant, absolute peace of the 1885 cellar, letting the invisible jasmine soothe the tired corners of your mind. With every long, soft exhalation, release the frantic, noisy demands of the modern world, letting them drift away like the exhausted, parchment-thin petals falling softly onto the hemp cloth. You are safely enclosed within the ultimate subterranean sanctuary of preservation, a place where time stands beautifully still, where memories are gently cradled in white wax, and where the most precious things in the world are born entirely of patience, darkness, and profound, undisturbed rest. In the deepest hours of the nocturnal cycle, when the world above has entirely surrendered to the dark, the Enfleurage Cellar reveals its most profound, comforting philosophy, the philosophy of the shadow. In the modern world, darkness is often feared as an absence, a frightening void where light has failed or retreated. But within this subterranean sanctuary, darkness is understood and revered as a tangible, profoundly protective substance. It is a heavy, velvet-like material that actively wraps itself around the delicate work of preservation. As you gaze into the farthest, most recessed corners of the vaulted stone bays, the shadows are not black and empty. They possess a rich, complex depth, a deep, saturated charcoal blue hue that feels incredibly soft and yielding to the eyes. The solitary, flickering amber flames of the small clay oil lamps do not fight against this darkness. Rather, they perform a slow, elegant waltz with it. The light reaches only a few feet from the cherry wood table before it willingly yields to the gloom, creating a gradient of illumination that draws the mind inward, away from the vast, overwhelming scale of the outside world, and down into a deeply intimate, microscopic focus. These shadows are the ultimate guardians of the resting jasmine, shielding the sensitive, extracting fats from any stray beams of moonlight that might slip down the narrow ventilation shafts. To let your eyes rest upon these soft, wavering edges of light and dark is to feel an immediate physical relaxation in the optical nerves, a deep, soothing relief from the harsh, demanding glare of the waking hours. Accompanying this visual softness is the profound philosophy of the cellar's acoustic micro-world. Just as the darkness is not an empty void, the silence of the room is not a dead clinical absence of sound. It is instead a magnificent, highly textured canvas upon which only the most delicate, microscopic noises are allowed to paint. When the loud, intrusive cacophony of the day is stripped away, the ears begin to perceive the beautiful hidden language of the ancient building slowly breathing in the dark. There is the incredibly faint, muffled sound of the immense limestone foundations settling under the weight of the night, a deep subsonic groan that vibrates through the flagstones and into the soles of your feet, offering a profound reassurance of absolute structural safety. You might hear the microscopic, dry creak of an oak chassis frame contracting by a fraction of a millimeter as the subterranean air cools by a single degree, a sound like a tiny wooden sigh. And always playing in the deep background is the hypnotic, rhythmic dripping of the mountain spring into the dark granite basin. Each drop falls with a perfectly rounded liquid plop, sending a sequence of silver concentric ripples across the obsidian surface of the water. These tiny, isolated sounds do not disturb the silence. They measure it, scale it, and make the absolute quiet feel unimaginably vast and deeply comforting. They are the acoustic equivalent of the slow, steady heartbeat of a sleeping mother, lulling the anxious mind into a state of total, unquestioning trust. This profound isolation breeds a philosophy of complete, beautiful disconnection. To exist within these thick, mortar-bound walls is to be utterly unreachable by the frantic demands, the pressing anxieties, and the relentless obligations of the external universe. Above the heavy terracotta ceilings, the world continues its restless spinning. The night sky is filled with the cold, distant charting of the stars. The nocturnal predators of the Provençal hillsides are executing their silent, delicate hunts through the lavender rows, and in the distant, sprawling cities of Europe, telegraph operators are hunched over brass keys, tapping out urgent messages of commerce and politics. But down here beneath the earth, none of that furious, striving energy matters in the slightest. The thick, rocky mantle of the maritime Alps acts as an impenetrable shield, deflecting the chaotic frequencies of human worry and leaving only a pure, undisturbed core of absolute peace. The cellar is a masterclass in the art of letting go. The flowers have let go of their stems, the fat has let go of its impurities, and the artisans have let go of their tools. As you rest within this space, you are invited to mirror this magnificent surrender. You are granted complete permission to sever the invisible, stressful tethers that bind you to your waking responsibilities. There is absolutely nothing you need to solve, no one you need to answer to, and nowhere you need to be. You are perfectly hidden, safely buried within the soft, fragrant layers of 1885, enveloped in a historical cocoon where the outside world simply ceases to exist. If we zoom our awareness back to the microscopic theatre of the resting frames, we find a beautiful physical metaphor for the peaceful mind. The heavy panes of hand-blown watery green glass sit in the pitch black, their edges catching the faintest stray photon of amber light to create a dull emerald glow. Between these panes, the layer of purified winter fat, the core rests in a state of absolute unyielding stillness. It is completely smooth, save for the tiny dark indentations left by the jasmine blossoms. This fat is the ultimate symbol of perfect receptivity and calm retention. It does not ripple, it does not agitate, and it does not fight the subtle changes in the air. It simply exists, holding on to the beautiful, invisible essence it has captured, while remaining entirely undisturbed by the surrounding darkness. The wax is cool to the touch, dense and perfectly stable. Imagine your own mind adopting the physical properties of this resting pommade. Allow the turbulent, splashing waves of your daily thoughts to slowly congeal, to smooth out, and to settle into a vast, white, unblemished surface of cool wax. Let the beautiful, soothing memories of your life sink deeply into this stable matrix, held safely in the dark, while the trivial anxieties and sharp worries of the day simply bounce off the surface, unable to penetrate the thick, protective layer of your deep relaxation. The mind becomes a quiet, subterranean vault, flawlessly designed to capture and hold only that which is sweet, enduring, and peaceful. As the long, heavy hours of the night stretch out toward an impossibly distant dawn, the philosophy of the cellar seamlessly merges with the deep physical mechanics of entering sleep. The boundary between the cool, heavy air of the room and the edges of your own physical body begins to blur, dissolving into a singular, unified experience of profound, weighted rest. The respiration of the cellar, the slow, rhythmic exchange of moisture and fragrance between the stone walls, the wooden frames, and the sleeping blossoms syncs perfectly with the slow, rhythmic rising and falling of your own chest. Every inhalation draws the heavy, narcotic sweetness of the jasmine deeper into your blood, acting as a natural, invisible sedative that unties the microscopic knots in your muscles, starting from the crown of your head and melting slowly down through your shoulders, your arms, and into your heavy resting hands. Every exhalation expels the last remaining fragments of conscious thought, leaving the mind beautifully empty and perfectly still. You are sinking deeper into the mattress, your body feeling as heavy and comfortably supported as the thick, wild cherry-wood table anchored to the ancient flagstones. The amber light of the oil lamp behind your closed eyelids is fading to a soft, dark, enveloping warmth. The journey backward through time has reached its quietest, deepest destination. The philosophy of captured time, of invisible legacies, and of absolute stillness has woven a heavy, inescapable net of comfort around you, pulling you gently, inevitably toward the soft, welcoming threshold of true, undisturbed slumber. In the deepest, quietest stretch of this subterranean night, the final subtle transition of the cellar begins with the slow, inevitable exhaustion of the unglazed clay oil lamps. The highly refined rapeseed oil, having burned with a steady, quiet devotion for so many long hours, now sits at the very bottom of the shallow, hand-thrown terracotta reservoirs. The thick braided cotton wick, hand-spun by the village weavers and soaked thoroughly in the golden liquid, begins to draw upon the very last precious drops of its fuel. As the oil level imperceptibly drops, the character of the small flame undergoes a beautiful softening transformation. It loses the sharp, bright, golden intensity it possessed during the late afternoon, mellowing gracefully into a deep, heavy, slumbering shade of burnt orange and muted amber. This flame no longer dances or flickers against the draft, it merely pulses, a slow rhythmic expansion and contraction of light that perfectly mimics the slow, heavy breathing of a deeply sleeping body. The edges of this orange radiance are impossibly soft, blurring seamlessly into the surrounding charcoal blue shadows without leaving a harsh line upon the stone. To watch this flame through the heavy, drooping lids of your resting eyes is to witness the physical embodiment of a long, peaceful exhalation. The light is surrendering, willingly giving up its vigil over the cherrywood table and the oak chassis frames, allowing the protective velvet mantle of the total dark to finally claim the room. You can feel your own internal energy mirroring this fading light, the bright, anxious sparks of waking consciousness dissolving one by one, melting down into a warm, comfortable, glowing ember at the very center of your chest. As the light from the dying lamp recedes, the microscopic theatre of the air finally comes to a complete, absolute rest. Throughout the day, the tiny, invisible particles of dried lavender, floating golden pollen, and fine, unbleached cotton fibers had danced their slow, weightless waltz in the amber sunbeams, buoyed by the subtle thermal currents created by the movement of the artisans and the warming stones above. Now, with the cellar locked in perfect subterranean thermal equilibrium, those invisible currents have ceased entirely. Gravity, gentle and undeniable, asserts its quiet dominance over the enclosed room. The dust motes begin their final, incredibly slow descent through the gloom. They drift downward through the heavy, fragrant air like microscopic feathers settling after a long flight, touching down upon the smooth, cool surfaces of the flagstones, the curved edges of the clay pots, and the broad, dark shoulders of the master's worktable. They land without a single sound, adding an infinitesimal, invisible layer of physical softness to the room. This silent, microscopic snowfall of history is the ultimate expression of stillness. There is no passing wind to stir them, no canvas shoe to send them spiraling back into the air. They have found their permanent resting place, just as you are finding yours. Imagine the scattered, floating thoughts in your own mind, the lingering questions, the stray memories, the tiny fragments of tomorrow's tasks, becoming heavy, slow, and soft, just like those drifting motes. Watch them slowly float downward, sinking away from your active awareness, settling softly into the deep, quiet floor of your unconscious mind, leaving the space above completely clear, perfectly empty, and beautifully serene. In this newly emptied acoustic space, the only remaining measurement of existence is the deep, majestic rhythm of the brass pendulum clock mounted upon the central molasses rock pillar. However, in the profound depths of this 1885 night, even the sound of time itself seems to dramatically change its texture. The metallic escapement mechanism no longer sounds like a rigid measurement of passing seconds. It becomes a hypnotic, looping drone, a low, resonating, rhythmic hum that vibrates through the thick limestone and gently enters the marrow of your bones. The heavy brass bob swings with an incredible, sweeping slowness, fighting the thick, invisible resistance of the heavily perfumed air. It swings to the left, hanging in a long, drawn-out moment of total suspension, and then it slowly drops, swinging to the right in an equally long, deeply comforting return. Left and right, inhale and exhale, rise and fall. Your physical body is completely willingly entrained to this slow, mechanical heartbeat. You can feel the heavy, rhythmic pulse in the very tips of your fingers, in the relaxed arches of your feet, and deep within the base of your throat. The clock is no longer pushing you forward into the demands of the future, it is rocking you gently and endlessly in the dark cradle of the permanent present. The space between each tick of the brass gears seems to stretch and expand, creating vast, silent valleys of time where absolutely nothing happens, where nothing is expected of you, and where the mind can simply float, untethered and free, in a dark, beautiful void of total relaxation. As you sink deeper into this rhythmic trance, become intimately aware of the massive structural embrace of the ancient building that surrounds you, the thick hand-hewn blocks of local stone and the deep calcite veined foundations are not merely walls. They are a geological fortress, millions of years old, standing as the ultimate, unyielding guardians of your rest. Over the course of the long night, these stones have slowly released the microscopic traces of solar heat they absorbed during the afternoon, reaching a state of flawless, unchanging thermal balance with the deep earth below. To imagine resting your hand against these stones now is to feel the cool, solid, unwavering permanence of the mountain itself. They passively absorb all vibration, all anxiety, and all external noise from the world above, neutralizing them entirely within their dense crystalline structures. This subterranean womb wraps around you a heavy protective shell that entirely blocks out the chaotic frequencies of the modern century. You are buried under feet of solid, quiet earth, insulated from the turning of the stars and the eventual rising of the sun. The air you breathe is perfectly trapped, perfectly conditioned and flawlessly still. You are completely secure, held safely in a space that has been specifically engineered by generations of master craftsmen to ensure that nothing, absolutely nothing, can disturb the delicate, silent work of preservation. Allow your physical body to mimic the immense grounding weight of those stones. Let your limbs become incredibly heavy, sinking so deeply into the soft surface beneath you that the boundary between your skin and the fabric completely disappears, leaving only a sensation of profound, grounded gravity. In this ultimate state of physical heaviness and mental emptiness, your consciousness begins to directly mirror the beautiful, passive surrender of the jasmine petal resting upon the white, grooved fat of the chassis frame. The pommade, that thick, luxurious, purified matrix of winter lard and beef tallow, waits in the absolute dark, offering a flawlessly smooth, soft, yielding bed for the exhausted flower. Just as the delicate botanical star gives up its volatile essence, sinking its tiny green calyx into the cool, receptive wax without a struggle, you are now invited to give up the last, clinging remnants of your waking identity. Surrender your final hidden tensions to the dark. The imaginary fat is cool, incredibly dense, and infinitely supportive. It rises gently to meet the contours of your exhausted mind, cradling your thoughts with a soft, microscopic elasticity that prevents you from falling while completely absorbing the heavy weight of your consciousness. You are no longer separate from the cellar. You have become a vital, resting part of its silent alchemy. You are the sleeping flower, and the velvet darkness is the white wax, holding you perfectly still, perfectly safe, and perfectly preserved. The scent of the room, that heavy, narcotic, indole-rich sweetness of the jasmine, anchored by the faint balsamic warmth of the benzoin resin, is no longer something you merely smell. It is a heavy, fragrant ocean you are slowly dissolving into. The sharp edges of the waking world are blurring, fading, and melting away entirely, leaving only this pure, suspended state of botanical grace, a gentle, drifting descent into the most profound healing and absolute sleep you have ever known. The final, microscopic drop of golden rapeseed oil has been quietly consumed by the braided cotton wick of the small clay lamp, signaling the ultimate beautiful surrender of the cellar to the deep, enveloping night. The faint, pulsing amber glow that had so faithfully guarded the cherrywood table for hours begins to shrink inward, pulling its soft edges back from the towering stacks of oak chassis frames and the rough-hewn stone pillars. The flame does not fight its conclusion, it accepts its rest with a graceful fading sigh. It diminishes from a soft orange corona to a tiny pinpoint speck of deep cherry-red heat, glowing bravely for one final suspended moment before silently winking out into the absolute dark. The transition from dimness to pitch blackness is not an abrupt shock, but a deeply comforting slow descent, like a heavy velvet theatre curtain falling gently over a completed masterful performance. This darkness is incredibly rich, a saturated three-dimensional void that actively embraces the physical body, rushing in to fill every arched vault and every narrow corridor with a soft, palpable weight. It is a protective, insulating darkness that requires absolutely nothing of your eyes. You no longer need to see, to process, or to judge the surrounding space. The visual world has been beautifully erased, leaving a pure, blank canvas of obsidian calm that allows the optical nerves to finally, completely let go of the day's bright demands. Within this newly established, perfect blackness, the acoustic landscape of the subterranean sanctuary softens into a hypnotic, repetitive lullaby that perfectly mirrors the deepest stages of human slumber. The grand brass pendulum clock on the central molasses rock pillar, which once sounded like a clear metallic heartbeat, now seems to recede into a vast muffled distance. Its rhythmic thunk, thunk, thunk becomes a soft subsonic vibration, a low sweeping hum that you feel in the heavy marrow of your resting bones rather than hear with your ears. The tempo of the swinging brass bob seems to stretch infinitely, the space between each swing growing wider, longer, and more profoundly peaceful. Matching this decelerated rhythm is the slow, distant, liquid echo of the mountain spring dripping endlessly into the dark granite basin. The water falls with a gentle, rounded perfection, each solitary droplet plunging into the still pool with a tiny musical resonance that ripples outward into the dark. Plop, a long, vast pause of total silence. Plop, another endless valley of quiet. These isolated sounds act as gentle hypnotic anchors, tethering your drifting consciousness to the heavy, peaceful present. They guide your own breathing into a parallel state of profound metronomic slowness. Your chest rises with the heavy, unhurried grace of the swinging pendulum, and falls with the soft, yielding release of the water droplets sinking into the deep pool, creating a perfect, unbroken loop of physical and acoustic tranquility. Hidden within the deep velvet gloom stacked by the hundreds in their towering, silent, geometric columns, the heavy oak chassis frames have finally achieved their ultimate state of botanical and alchemical stasis. The millions of individual jasmine blossoms, sealed so tightly between the heavy, watery green panes of hand-blown plate glass, have finished their quiet, invisible, beautiful labor. They have exhaled the very last microscopic molecules of their sweet, heavy, nocturnal essence into the surrounding, purified matrix of the winter fat. The absorption is entirely, magnificently complete. The white blossoms have faded into incredibly thin, fragile, translucent ghosts, leaving their golden, heavy souls safely trapped within the wax. The pommade, that thick, rich, pearlescent blend of meticulously washed lard and mountain beef tallow, now holds the absolute concentrated spirit of the Provençal summer in a state of flawless, unchanging preservation. It is completely, utterly still. The wax does not ripple, it does not shift, it does not warm, and it does not breathe. It exists in a permanent, suspended perfection, a flawless, smooth mirror of botanical memory, safely buried deep beneath the earth, completely immune to the frantic passage of time above. Let your own mind effortlessly adopt the physical properties of this resting, beautifully saturated fat. Allow the chaotic, fragmented, splashing thoughts of your waking hours to be completely absorbed by the heavy, silent darkness of the room, held perfectly still in a vast, quiet, unmoving matrix of mental peace. There is no more processing to be done, no more reaching for distant goals, and no more striving against the current of the day. Your consciousness is preserved in a state of absolute, unyielding, heavy calm, protected by the thick, invisible, insulating walls of your own deep relaxation, perfectly mirroring the silent, unhurried, flawless geometry of the wooden frames resting eternally in the absolute, enveloping dark. Now, focus on the air itself. The air within this subterranean chamber has settled into a condition of absolute, hypersaturated stillness. Without the slight thermal currents generated by the burning oil lamps or the physical movement of the artisan's soft-soled shoes, the atmosphere ceases to circulate. It hangs heavy, dense, and infinitely comforting in the vaulted space, forming a thick, invisible blanket that presses softly against your skin. This air is overwhelmingly rich with the complex narcotic aroma of the completed enfleurage, the deep, indole rich sweetness of the sleeping jasmine, perfectly counterbalanced by the faint, earthy, mineral dampness of the ancient limestone walls, the dry, seasoned, fibrous scent of the stacked oak frames, and the distant, subtle, balsamic warmth of the pulverized benzoin resin. This complex, heavy perfume does not merely register in your olfactory nerves. It acts as a physical weight, a deeply soothing, invisible pressure that rests gently upon your chest, your shoulders, and your heavy, drooping eyelids. With every long, incredibly slow inhalation, this narcotic sweetness travels deep into your bloodstream, acting as a natural, potent, botanical sedative that seeks out and dissolves the very last hidden knots of physical tension lingering in your muscles. You can feel a warm, heavy, melting sensation spreading slowly outward from your core, flowing down the lengths of your arms to the very tips of your relaxed, motionless fingers, and traveling down your legs to the soles of your heavy resting feet. You are sinking, millimeter by millimeter, into the soft, supporting fabric beneath you, your physical form becoming entirely indistinguishable from the deep, heavy, grounded mass of the cellar floor. The boundaries of your body are dissolving into the fragrant, protective darkness, leaving only a pure, floating sensation of absolute unburdened existence. As the journey reaches its final, quietest destination, the concept of time itself simply melts away, leaving only an endless, beautiful ocean of undisturbed rest. The cellar, the artisans, the white fat, and the sweet blossoms all blur together into a single cohesive wash of grey, slowly fading into an infinite velvety black. There is only the slow, rhythmic rising and falling of your breath. Inhale the heavy, peaceful stillness. Exhale the fading echoes of the day. Inhale the deep, protective safety of the ancient stone. Exhale your remaining awareness into the soft, waiting void. You are perfectly hidden, safely tucked away beneath the earth in a forgotten, serene pocket of 1885. The darkness is holding you, the silence is rocking you, and the heavy, sweet scent of the resting flowers is pulling you down, down, down into a place of flawless preservation. Let the mind drift unanchored and free, floating on the slow, dark current of a deeply slumbering history, deeper and deeper into the quiet, softer and softer into the dark. There is nothing left to think, nothing left to do but surrender to the vast, comforting embrace of the night. Sleep is a thick, gentle wave that washes over you, carrying you away into perfect, dreamless peace. Rest now in the beautiful, silent sanctuary of the dark. Welcome to Sleepy History with Wesley, your personal sanctuary of ancient tales. Here, we blend authentic historical events with gentle AI technology to recreate immersive, soothing journeys through time. This channel is crafted specifically for relaxation and sleep support. TAND is not a substitute for professional medical advice. For your safety, please do not listen while driving or operating machinery. Now, close your eyes and let history carry you into a peaceful sleep.